everybody. Welcome back to my channel, and thank you for joining me for another true crime deep dive. Today, we continue the case of 32-year-old Stephanie Marie Wasilishin. We talked about a lot in part one, so if you haven't seen that video yet, please go watch it first. I will link it in the description box, but let's have a quick recap just to get our brains back on track with the case and its details. In the summer of 1993, 32-year-old Stephanie Wasilishin was shot at point-blank range inside her home on Coffee Pot Drive in Sedona, Arizona. Her two young daughters were in the house at the time, including her 3-year-old Christina, who repeatedly would later tell the police that her father, Russell Peterson, killed her mother. Russell, Stephanie's live-in boyfriend, gave investigators multiple versions of what happened that night, first calling it an accident during a struggle, later suggesting Stephanie may have taken her own life, but the physical evidence tells a very different story. Stephanie was shot in the neck with a Ruger Red Hawk .44 Magnum in a contact wound, indicating the barrel was pressed directly against her skin. Gunshot residue was found only on her left hand, her non-dominant hand, in a pattern consistent with a defensive posture, not self-infliction. The medical examiner ruled her death a homicide, and a police reenactment later showed that Stephanie could not have fired the weapon herself at the angle that the wound suggested. So in the hours before her death, Stephanie had spoken at length with family and her ex-partner, Craig, expressing unhappiness in her relationship, concerns about Russell drinking, and plans to leave Sedona with her daughters. Meanwhile, Russell delayed calling 911. He contacted his father first, handled and rehandled the gun, and struggled to provide a consistent, coherent account of events. So when part one ended, we had a ruling of homicide, a child eyewitness statement, physical evidence pointing away from a self-inflicted death, and a case that, despite all of that, would not move forward the way anyone might expect. We do have a lot to talk about today, a lot. It's going to be another long video, but before we get into it, let's have a word from the sponsor of today's video, Mint Mobile. I think a lot of us have reached this point where we're really rethinking what we actually need to be paying full price for, especially when there are alternatives out there that give you the same quality without the inflated cost. And for me, I've discovered wireless plans are a big one. For a long time, it just felt like one of those bills you accept as, that's just what it costs. It costs a lot, for the convenience and being able to use internet while you're outside of Wi-Fi and having good service that doesn't drop in random areas. Okay, we're willing to pay that. But Mint Mobile kind of flipped that idea on its head. Mint Mobile reimagined the entire wireless experience by making it easy and online. No stores, no salespeople, no awkward upsells. You just go online, choose what works for you, and that's it. And the big thing here is that you're still getting premium wireless without the premium price tag. Right now, Mint Mobile has a limited time offer where new customers can get an unlimited wireless plan for just $15 a month when you choose a 3, 6, or 12-month plan. That's 50% off and their lowest price of the year. All plans are going to include unlimited talk and text on the nation's largest 5G network, so you're not trading quality for savings, you're just not overpaying. What I also really like is how flexible everything is. You can bring your own unlocked phone or shop for a new one through Mint. You can keep your phone number, keep all your contacts, pictures, everything on your phone, and switch over in minutes with an eSIM from home. A lot of people avoid switching because it feels complicated, but Mint Mobile makes it genuinely simple. There are also a lot of features baked in that people don't always realize they're paying extra for elsewhere, like hotspot being included on unlimited plans and free calling to Mexico, Canada, and the UK. And instead of forcing you into a one-size-fits-all plan, Mint lets you choose the data amount that actually fits your usage so you're not paying for something you don't need. So stop letting your wireless bill break your bank. Get this new customer offer and pay just $15 a month for a 3, 6, or 12-month plan. That's 50% off an unlimited wireless plan at mintmobile.com/stephanieharlowe. That's mintmobile.com/stephanieharlowe. Mint's whole model is about bulk savings. The more months you buy up front, the more you save, and it's one of those things where once you look at it, It's hard not to wonder why wireless has been done the expensive way for so long. So if you've been thinking about switching or even just questioning why your phone bill is as high as it is, like I did every single month, this is a really good time to check it out. You can head to mintmobile.com/stephanieharlowe. The link is also in the description box, and lock in that $15 a month unlimited plan while this offer is available. This is a limited time offer, upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for a 12-month plan required. That's $15 a month equivalent, taxes and fees extra, initial plan term only. Over 50 gigs may slow when network is busy. A capable device required. Availability, speed, and coverage varies. See mintmobile.com. Thank you so much to Mint Mobile for sponsoring today's video, and let's dive in. Okay, we're going to dive into everything. Once again, I apologize if my voice kind of fluctuates or sounds a little weird, congested. Would you believe it? I'm sick again. I'm sick again. So yeah, I know everybody's going to be like, what's wrong with your immune system? I have children. That's what's wrong with it. So everybody out there who's also dealing with just constantly being sick since, I don't know, Thanksgiving, I feel ya. But let's dive into everything today. We have a lot to talk about, like I said. Okay, Russell Peterson has already been interviewed by the Sedona police once in the early morning hours of July 9th, 1993. We went through that interview in part 1. On July 10th, the police wanted to speak to him again. So they headed over to the Poco Diablo Resort, where Ruth Bayland, a friend of both Stephanie's and Russell's, had arranged 2 rooms for Russell and his parents, who had come in from Phoenix. So his mother and father, who I believe at that time were separated or divorced. They were not together. They both lived in Phoenix, and they both came down to see Russell in Sedona. And then Ruth Bayland set them up with rooms at this hotel.
Since date is July 10th, 1993. I was 3:21 p.m. at Poco Diablo Resort, room 204. I was speaking with Russell.
Detective Walter Spokes and investigator Gary Saravo wanted Russell to go over the events of the evening of July 8th again, and they had further questions, which Russell said he would be more than happy to answer. So they start again with the morning of July 8th, and if you remember, in his first interview, Russell said that it was a typical day. Both he and Stephanie woke up around 11 or 11:30, they made coffee, and then they went into work together. However, now Russell has more details.
The things that morning were fine. It was like any other day. I mean, with 2 little girls waking up in the house, Stephanie usually sleeps till about 11:30, 12 o'clock. Nobody wants to wake her up, so we just let her sleep. And she wakes up. Tell her it's time to get ready for work. And we proceed and we go to work together. Yes.
So now Russell is not saying they woke up together at the same time. He's making it seem like he woke up early with Nicole and Christina, the kids, and they all had to tiptoe around the house and let Stephanie sleep because she likes to sleep in and everyone is too afraid to wake her up. Now, is this the truth, or is Russell progressively setting a narrative in which Stephanie was this unpredictable, aggressive person and he had to create an environment around her in order to not provoke her? We're going to get more into this, trust me, because I think it's the latter. So the police asked if Russell and Stephanie had argued that morning, and once again, in his first interview, Russell mentioned no arguments. He said the day was like any other day and everything was fine, but in this second interview, the narrative continues to evolve.
Are you arguing that morning or anything? No, not necessarily. The only arguments that happen during the morning hours are the house is dirty. I mean, the kids, let's try and pick it up a little bit and make it nice. How about at work? Any problems at work? Nothing out of the ordinary. Acting okay. She was a little off. When I say a little off, to know Stephanie is to know that on any given day, it all depends on how you accept that. I mean, she might say something to you that she means, but she doesn't. It's an indirect kind of thing. And I just kind of took everything always with a grain of salt. Like there was nothing off. Just another day. Let's just get done what we have to do and we'll make it home. It was basically a regular day for her. Yes.
Now, we do know that Stephanie was a clean freak, and she was particular about the way her home was kept and cleaned, so this adds up. But we do hear again the additional details of Stephanie was volatile. We all had to manage our moods and our behaviors to try and get through the day with no incident. It's all about how Stephanie was deciding to behave that day, and Russell, he just took it with a grain of salt. He didn't react because if he were to react, then it would get worse, right? This is an escalating narrative, and this is all leading to somewhere. Now, Russell's then asked to talk about Stephanie as a person, and he sure does.
Talk to you about Stephanie. Stephanie was a loving person. I do believe that Stephanie loved me. I know that Stephanie loved her kids. I know that Stephanie, through things that she had never told me, had stuff in her past that had never really surfaced. And she was embarrassed to maybe present them to me. It was almost like, well, it was an acceptance or a rejectance type thing. If I listened and I accepted it, that's fine. But for the most part, it might have been rejectance. So we didn't talk too much about her past. I took her out of abusive environments. Ones that where she was with Craig Daly, the father of, other ones where she had a tendency to be involved with illegal substances. And when I went to the Crescent Hotel, she looked at me, I looked at her, and we bonded to a certain extent there. I had left. She had contacted me when I was in Southern California and found me. Then I took her back to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where we lived for a good year and a half. Came back to Phoenix while she was pregnant, which had her there. Brought her up to Sedona. We did my brother's wedding in Southern California. I truly feel that the acceptance that she got on a positive level wasn't really what she was looking or striving for, or made that medium in her mind.
Okay, I'm listening along with you, and there is more, but I want to cut in for a moment here. So, it's pretty common today for people to believe they know a lot about psychology and human behavior because we have so much content about that on social media. We can hear things, we can hear from a lot of different people, and we can kind of teach ourselves. People teach themselves about mental health and behavior and psychology, and we call them armchair psychologists. And there's also a level of increased attention on this kind of stuff because of an increased focus on mental health in general nowadays. So it's common to see people who aren't educated or trained in psychology necessarily, but they're out there educating themselves and making speculations based on their informal, self-driven education. Some have a better informal, self-driven education than others. Some use this informal education to kind of increase cognitive bias and make it, seem like they're less wrong and other people are more wrong. But needless to say, back in 1993, Russell Peterson was an armchair psychologist when it came to his girlfriend, Stephanie Wasilishin. Although Russell says that Stephanie kept things from him and they didn't talk a lot about her past, you will repeatedly hear him assign thoughts, fears, motivations, and emotional deficits to Stephanie. You will also hear him constantly, and not subtly either, positioning himself as Stephanie's rescuer, placing himself as the center, the architect of her stability. The moral of Russell's story is going to be, I gave her everything, but she was too broken to receive it.
She had been used to, from what she told me, on a limited amount of occasions. Abuse from her mother, abuse from her family, possible, right, from a stepfather, of things that she never wanted to really bring forward. Because then that would mean that, well, Russell doesn't accept me. What about his family? Do they? Will they? Won't they? She always wanted to take a back step, and there was no reason for it because she was at the forefront of what we were doing. I mean, she was part of it 110%. There was no question about that. Not only in my eyes, not only in her eyes, but in everybody around her. But she always came across there was a certain barrier. I kind of knew it, nobody else knew it. And that could have been through her being aggressive at certain points. Not aggressive physically, but aggressive verbally.
Remember that Stephanie held so much back from Russell, and she would never really tell him about her past for fear that Russell and his family would not accept her or for fear that they would judge her. But Russell does seem to know an awful lot about what Stephanie went through in her childhood as she grew up. An awful lot. And this is simply my opinion, but I think that Stephanie did open up to Russell, and she did tell him about what she had experienced and how it made her feel. I believe she was vulnerable with him about those things. And once again, my opinion only, I think Russell used those vulnerabilities against her to gaslight her and make her feel that any issue in their relationship was because of her deficits, the deficits that were not her fault, but were attributed to her unstable early life. I think, as he is doing now, Russell probably psychoanalyzed Stephanie and made her feel that she was broken, he was healthy, and so he could not possibly be doing anything wrong, even if she felt in her heart and her instincts that he was. Now, this isn't always necessarily wrong. Somebody could come from an unstable and difficult childhood, and it will affect negatively their interactions in relationships. And I don't think that wasn't necessarily the case with Stephanie. However, I don't think that anybody's perfect. And I think that a certain type of person, the person I believe Russell Peterson was, will find people like that and then capitalize on their background and use their background and their trauma and their quote unquote brokenness to consistently get and regain control over them. So I believe that Russell sent a consistent message to Stephanie. Her lens through which she viewed life and love was just so cracked and distorted. Anytime she maybe thought he was the problem, she was just not seeing the situation clearly. For instance, let's say you're in a relationship with somebody, you have divorced parents, and their parents are married and together. And so there's this sort of, image that maybe they have a better understanding of what a healthy relationship is. And you're with this person and they will consistently tell you throughout your relationship, I am loving you. And when you tell them, I don't feel like this is love, they will say to you, well, how could you know what love is? You've never seen it. You've never experienced it. Your parents divorced. You never had healthy love modeled to you. Therefore, you wouldn't know that this is love the way I'm treating you. But I have parents who are together. Therefore, I have had healthy love modeled towards me. Therefore, you need to just trust me that what I'm doing to you and how I'm treating you, as toxic as you may feel it is, as bad as it makes you feel, that is actually love, and you just don't know. That's a good example of it. So Russell was then asked if Stephanie had ever threatened him before the evening of July 8th, 1993. And Russell said that the only threat Stephanie had ever used against him was their daughter, Christina. And this is something that I do believe, actually, that after a long time of being gaslit and made to feel that she was always the problem, therefore Russell never had any work to do and nothing ever changed with him, Stephanie eventually began considering leaving him. And she told him that if she were to leave, their daughter would be going with her.
She always had the power to take it away, to do whatever she wanted to do, and to play the part. Well, you may never see her again, or I'll make sure of certain things. But when would she make those types of commitments? Whenever she felt, in my eyes, I'm not a psychologist, but I'm a smart person. Whenever she felt that she wasn't getting the attention that she needed, so therefore she would look for it in other means, whether it be through a daughter, whether it be through a mother, a brother, a sister, regardless. She always had that subliminal thing in the back of her mind from only what I feel.
Russell is trying to be very clear here. He's not a mental health professional, and we thank him for that humility and honesty, but he is a smart person. It boils down to Stephanie not getting enough attention again, and based on what we know about Stephanie, we might tend to believe that she liked and wanted attention from the man that she was with. After all, she had left her ex, Craig Daly, because he wasn't as attentive or as suave as Russell Peterson, right? He was kind of old news, and Russell was this new, handsome, driven man who's going to own his own restaurant one day. Maybe she thought Russell could bring her further in life than Craig could. But are we supposed to believe that every time Stephanie didn't feel Russell was paying enough attention to her, that number one, she was wrong, and number two, that she dangled the loss of his daughter in front of him? That there weren't conversations of, hey, Russell, I don't feel like we're getting enough time together. I feel like you work too much. I feel like your career is your priority, and I would really like if you could put more of your attention on myself and your child. And there weren't many of those conversations before all of a sudden she was like, hey, if you can't work on this and you can't be here and you can't be present, then I'm going to have to move on with my life. And of course, our daughter Christina is coming with me. She's my daughter. I'm the one who's raising her. You're at work all the time. You couldn't even do it if I wasn't here. It makes absolute sense that eventually those conversations and those threats would happen. Now, according to those who knew Stephanie and Russell, she had been trying to make the relationship work for many years, but Russell was always working or drunk, to the point where they couldn't even sleep in the same bed and hadn't been intimate in over half a year. The police then asked Russell if Stephanie had ever made threatening comments to him at work. And by this time, they've also talked to people that Stephanie and Russell worked with, including Peter Korn, the manager of Pietro's restaurant, and Russell's good, supportive friend.
It all determines on what you consider a threat. What's
I have. That's what I'm saying. That's what we're trying to clear. We've heard stuff like she's threatened to come over and stick a knife in your gut.
Yeah, she's told me that she's going to stick a knife in my gut. She's going to poke my eyes out. She's going to do all kinds of things. Being two people who are together, who in a work environment, sometimes if you're in that given work environment, it makes her feel a step above, not because of the threat, just because other people might hear it, or she feels powerful, or whatever the case might be. And I never felt threatened, but she did say that stuff. There were times where, yes, she did.
What other kind of things did she say? Was there an incident where she actually tried to poke your eyes out?
No, I wouldn't say she tried to poke my eyes out, but I did wind up with a patch on my eye.
Would you tell us about that incident?
Okay, I'm going to cut in again. First of all, I do think that Russell Peterson was smart in a way. He's smart at being manipulative, at making people think and feel certain things, because he's doing multiple things at once as he answers these questions. He's saying, oh yeah, she said she was going to stick a knife in my gut, poke my eyes out, all sorts of things, which to a normal person, these kinds of threats do not sound like lighthearted threats. These words are visceral and shocking, but he's saying them very casually, as if he doesn't see anything wrong with them. But he knows that there's something wrong with them. He knows the police are like, what the hell? She said she was gonna poke your eye out and stab you in the stomach with a knife. And he's like, yeah, whatever. That was Stephanie for you. He's aware that he's downplaying it in his tone and his words, but that everyone else around him is going to be like, what did she say? They're going to be shocked, as they should. But then after painting Stephanie as someone who's allegedly made these violent threats, he immediately neutralizes them. He reframes them as performative, about power and attention, about making him look stupid at work so that she can feel better about herself. He's casting Stephanie as this crazy psychopath, this controlling, attention-hungry woman, while showing that he's not reactive. He's emotionally regulated. He's above it all. And here's where this escalating narrative that Russell's been painting throughout this police interview comes in, because it's almost as if Russell is mimicking the language of a domestic abuse victim. Yes, she said horrible things, but I know she didn't mean them. I mean, she loved me. I think she loved me. I never thought she would really hurt me. And listen, before everybody gets all upset, I'm not saying that a man can't be the victim of a domestic abuse. They can be. They have been. We've talked about Ryan Poston, and I believe he absolutely was the victim of domestic abuse. We've talked about Jason Corbett. Many men whose cases we've talked about. So I'm not saying that men cannot be the victims of domestic abuse. What I am saying is that in this specific situation, Stephanie is the one who is dead with a bullet through her throat, and Russell is still alive to control the narrative and introduce her alleged threats when she can't respond to their validity. And I don't believe he was the victim of domestic abuse. I think that he wants people to believe that. I think he wants people to think that. So at the end of that clip, you heard the police ask Russell something specific. Was there an incident where she actually tried to poke your eye out? And Russell responds in a specific way. No, I wouldn't say she tried to poke my eyes out, but I did wind up with a patch on my eye. This is interesting because as the listener, you're going to think these two things are related, right? Whatever incident left Russell with an eye patch must have been as a direct result to something Stephanie physically did to him, right? Of course you would. Of course. They're like, did she ever actually poke you in the eye? And he's like, I wouldn't say she did, but I did end up with an eye patch on. Of course you're going to think those two things are connected. He wants you to think they're connected. Well, let's listen and see if that's the case, that these two things are connected, as Russell Peterson gathers us all around the campfire to tell his story. As I mentioned in the last video, Russell is big on random extraneous details and long pauses. The details I have left in, the pauses I have cut out.
We were at 16th Street on Maryland at Mission Falls Apartments. And I was working at Giangelo's. I came home from work. And this was 3.5, 4 years ago. As far as specific details, no, I cannot give these to them. I do not know them right now. I wound up getting scratched.
What happened? It appears to me, and I'm not a psychologist, but it appears to me, I've been a policeman a long time, correct, that you're holding back and not telling us everything here. And let me understand what we're trying to do. The events of that night are not only important, but we're trying to see what you're like in your past, to see what your normal demeanor is, and her world, and put this thing together. So that's why we're asking about these things. And if that incident did occur, just tell us what happened. We're not trying to a bad picture of her.
I know you're not trying to throw me a curve, and I know that, I'm not being nailed to a cross with such a question. At 4 years ago, I would be lying to you if I tried to tell you the answer that you're looking for. I'm not saying you're trying to pry it out of me. I don't know the circumstances of that given point that what happened. I got scratched on the eye.
All right, you went home.
Yes.
And did you guys have an argument?
Probably not. It's just a young child. I don't even want to know. I don't even want to say that this was Stephanie's fault. It could have been holding the child, and with their hands being as free and far as they are, a scratch across the cornea, which it's actually very painful, and it takes 3-4 days to heal with the patch. But even when light goes through the patch, it's uncomfortable. I will not, and I will sit here and say that happened. I will not blame that on her. That was not her. I'm not blaming that on me. I'm necessarily saying that that was a case, from what I could remember, where I got her and picked her up. Her arms went up well, and it hit me in the cornea of the eye.
Let me summarize what happened here, just in case anyone is as confused as I was when I first heard this. I had to listen to it a few times, and let me just say, impressive word salad here. So Russell is saying this happened 3.5, 4 years ago. At that time, his daughter, Christina, would have been a baby. Remember, he said that after this incident, he ended up wearing an eye patch, and he had sort of definitely tried to suggest that Stephanie's threats of poking his eyes out were somehow definitely related to him ending up with an eye patch. The police are taking it seriously, as they should. They think, at first, he's acting like the victim of domestic violence. He's ashamed of this, and he doesn't want to say it straight out. There's a part of him that is still trying to protect his abuser. Russell's like, I can't give you the specific details. It was a long time ago, but I wound up getting scratched on the eye. And the cops are like, listen, just tell us what happened to you. And he's like, okay, but I don't know how the exact circumstances that led to me getting scratched on the eye happened. I don't know the exact circumstances that led up to this. Well, the cops say, was there an argument that happened leading up to this horrific eye-scratching attack? Probably not, Russell said. And then he says it was a young child, his daughter. You know how it is with babies, their arms flailing around. What did he say? So free, so far. I don't want to say it was Stephanie's fault, but the baby's hands, they're free, they go far. My eye got scratched. And by the way, guys, it was a very painful injury, okay? Light hitting it. It really was uncomfortable for a long time. It took a long time to heal. So Russell Peterson is saying that someone was holding baby Christina. And it doesn't really, I can't track whether he specifically says it was Stephanie or him holding baby Christina, but towards the end of that clip, it does sound like he says, I picked her up and baby Christina accidentally scratched his eye. Anyone who's ever had a baby understands how very possible this is. I mean, all my kids scratched me up good. I had to put little socks on their hands sometimes because they were scratching me up. They were scratching themselves up. The baby doesn't have coordination yet. Their movements are very jerky. And those little nails, little thin nails, they are sharp as knives. But then Russell goes on to say, listen, I'm not going to blame that on Stephanie. I will not sit here and blame that on her. Well, how the hell could you? Was she using your baby as a weapon? Was she wielding the baby like a dagger and she came rushing at you and somehow managed to convince an infant Christina to slash your eyes with her fingernails? It's absolutely ridiculous. They asked you if Stephanie had actually ever followed through on her alleged threats to poke your eyes out, and you said, well, I mean, I did end up in an eye patch, and then proceeded to tell a story about how your infant accidentally scratched your eye, and I wish I was kidding, guys. But this is real, and he doesn't stop. He continues being all vague and weird about it, which makes the police think he's not telling them something, which, once again, they are trained to, handle these kinds of things because this is the Sedona Police Department. They're 5 years old. They haven't had a ton of murder calls. They haven't had a ton of, shooting incidents, but they've probably responded to plenty of domestic violence incidents, and they are trained to recognize a domestic violence victim and how that person is not always going to want to come right out and say what happened, whether they're protecting their abuser or they feel shame about it or they don't even really want to accept yet that what's happening is happening. But they're trained to pick up on this and hear it when people are telling their version of events.
So you don't recall her attacking you and trying to?
No, I won't say Stephanie attacked me. Not at all.
Was Stephanie there?
Yes, she was.
When you're saying won't say, does that mean?
No,
That's not, that's, you just won't say it, or is that the truth?
that just means that rather than tell a lie or not come as close to the truth, this is what I feel happened.
Okay. That's what it's true.
Yeah.
Russell is intentionally choosing his words. He's not saying the truth, which is no, Stephanie did not attack me. He intentionally said, I won't say she attacked me. Police, they're obviously suspicious. They have picked up on Russell's decision to use what is called a speech choice qualifier, which is when someone talks about what they're willing to say instead of clearly stating what happened. He's not saying that Stephanie didn't attack him. He's implying that he's choosing not to say that she did, which leaves the listener feeling like, well, maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. Russell wants the police to continue wondering if Stephanie did attack him, even though he just explained what happened with the baby scratching his eye. Since Russell did eventually establish that his eye was scratched by the baby, Christina, his earlier framing makes no sense. Why bring it up in response to Stephanie's threats at all? There's no logical reason to connect those two topics unless the connection itself serves a purpose. And it does. That purpose was to plant this idea in the heads of the detectives. Russell introduces the idea that Stephanie may have physically harmed him. He avoids stating it outright to seed the suspicion, and then he ends with a benign explanation. Yeah, baby's arms, free and far. I got scratched in the eye by my baby. And Russell continues to be evasive, acting like he doesn't want to accuse Stephanie of anything, while the facts of the story he's telling make it clear that there's nothing to accuse her of. And this is when I knew that Russell Peterson had never been completely honest about what happened between himself and Stephanie on July 8th, because what he was doing in this interview was calculated, intentional, and not stemming from honesty or a desire to reveal the truth about anything. And he continues on in the interview with the same pattern of saying things that make Stephanie look like the most unhinged, violent person, but then making excuses for why she had said the things she had said, and making sure the police knew that he never took her seriously. He was never afraid of her. He is, in my opinion, cosplaying as a confused and traumatized domestic violence victim.
We never really fought. It all depends what you interpret as fight. An argument is not necessarily a fight. Okay, within arguments, she might have said, well, I'm going to put a knife in your back, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and that she's letting something out at me, not necessarily directed at me, but because I am the one there.
When she said that, did she ever like use something as a prop?
No, nothing at all.
You know, I want to hit you with this, or
No.
or you might just take the prop.
No, nothing at all.
Yes, once again, Russell, I believe, is cosplaying as a domestic violence victim. I think it is unforgivable and disgusting. He's saying things, he's like, we never really fought. Well, it depends. Like, what do you consider a fight to be? Did she say she was going to take a knife and stab me in my back or my body? Yes, but, she was never saying that to me. She was letting it out on me. I happened to be there. I was the one who was the vessel for all of her emotional and mental trauma and damage. I was her punching bag, but we never really fought. That's what he's doing. And he's making it seem like Stephanie was just venting out at him, using him as her punching bag. But it was never directed at him. It was all the stuff inside of her that made her do that. And he's not mad at her. He doesn't hold it. Did she say she was going to stab him in the back with a knife? Yeah, but people are like that. It's not a big deal. So once the police realized that there had never been viable incidents during which Stephanie had physically attacked Russell, they switched gears and they began questioning him about the night that she had ended up shot and dead. They asked him if he had been drinking that night, and Russell said he had one drink at work, and then he and Stephanie had shared the bottle of wine when he got home, 2 glasses for each of them. Russell said that Stephanie had also been drinking that night, and by the time they had finished the wine, he would say that she was impaired. Once again, in the interest of fairness and transparency, Stephanie's BAC at the time of her autopsy was 0.17%, which is twice the legal driving limit in the United States. So it is safe to say that Stephanie was a bit intoxicated at the time when she was shot and died. Now, what that might mean in the context of this case and what the evidence shows, we will come back to that. Russell said that he was in a good mood when he got home. He was a day and a half away from going to the second best thing in his life at Cornell University.
I was in a good mood. I'm a day and a half away from going through the second best thing in my life, which is at Cornell University. You had a taste of the cordon bleu. I'm happy. I'm excited. I had got my hair cut the day before. So, I am me. I don't have a lot of variables. I am me.
He uses the words, a taste of the cordon bleu again. And as we had already established in part 1, in the first episode, there was no such thing at Cornell University. And you see how he says he was close to going through the second best thing in his life. And there's a pause before he says second best thing. And that's because Russell is constantly careful with how he frames himself and how he frames the way he felt about Stephanie. He couldn't say that Cornell University was the best thing in his life because that would mean Stephanie had been right all along. He prioritized his work and his career more than her and the family they were building together, the life they were building together. His work was more important than anything, and he's always very careful to not verify that, not prove her right. He's also very careful to make sure the police know he's just an even-keeled, happy-go-lucky guy. He doesn't have mood swings. He's not all over the place like that Stephanie. He was happy and in a good mood. He was just himself, always happy and always in a good mood, always the good guy. Russell said that he and Stephanie were talking. She told him about the conversation with Craig Daly, but remember, Russell's just an even-keeled, logical, nice guy. He doesn't get over-emotional. He doesn't get jealous. Stephanie talking to her her ex for almost 2 hours didn't bother him in the least. He's like, I never got mad when she talked to him. She would call him for money he owed for Nicole, even though I had always offered to pay for anything. But Stephanie said no, that was Craig's responsibility. Then Russell goes back to, yeah, so I got out of the shower and the detectives had to steer him back. They told him, we're still talking about the conversation that Stephanie had with Craig. You said she had the conversation. You said you guys talked about it on the couch before she allegedly took a gun out and pointed it at you. So what did she tell you about that conversation? Clearly, this is important in some way. Something that happened in that conversation while you were sitting on the couch led to Stephanie getting the gun and pointing it at you. Because Russell wants you to believe there was nothing that was said in that conversation while they were sitting on the couch that led Stephanie to go get the gun. He wants you to believe that he has no idea why. There was nothing. We weren't upset. We weren't fighting. It wasn't aggressive. She just calmly got up, got the gun, and then I look up and she's there pointing it at me.
Stephanie always said, no, it's Craig's responsibility. And I came out of the shower.
We're still on the.
On that, yes.
What was the conversation about? She say? She just tell you I just talked to Craig for 2.5 hours or what?
Craig for 2.5 hours, and he may have invited her back to go and stay with him to see if they couldn't have patched things up.
Wait, what was that? He may have invited her to go back? Talking about Craig, Stephanie's ex. That sentence is nonsensical on its face. And it's not an accident. This is Russell's very specific kind of evasive linguistic maneuver. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The police are trying to establish a motive. If Craig had told Stephanie to come back to work things out, this might be a motive for Russell to be angry enough to want to stop Stephanie from taking his daughter and leaving while he's away for 10 days in New York. But remember, right before this, Russell said he wasn't upset by the conversation. Stephanie and Craig talked all the time, and then he tried to put himself back in the shower and getting out of the shower to avoid giving the details that might have made him look like a man with a motive. Because the shower happened before you had the conversation, right? So Russell's jumping around in the timeline because he's like, yeah, she talked to him and, she was saying this and then, yeah, I took a shower, which happened before the conversation about Craig. And then even when the police direct him back to those details, Russell still didn't come right out and say that Craig had wanted Stephanie back. He may have invited her to go back. He cannot say the words out loud because he knows how it makes the situation look. It goes right back to, I won't say she attacked me, because Russell speaks around facts instead of to them. According to Russell, even after Stephanie tells him this, he was still unbothered because he's just a logical, level-headed guy. And he didn't even ask her for details, Your girlfriend's telling you, hey, my ex, who I have a child with, may had not asked me to come back to him. And Russell's like, all right, cool. So do you want to talk about A Taste of Le Cordon Bleu?
I don't know the level of conversation they were at.
Did she tell you this?
No, she didn't threaten anything. She did not threaten anything.
She told you that. How did you feel about that?
I was uncomfortable, but because of the fact that I know that it's not my father and the relationship that we have had, it didn't really bother me all that much.
Didn't make you angry?
No.
What was she saying she was considering?
No, I don't think she said she considered it at all.
That he just made that he may or may not have.
He may or may not have. Gentlemen, I'm telling you, everything, it all happened so fast. I told you this the other night. I mean, whether what you see on TV, through sitcoms, through movies, I mean, the next thing I know, there was not a heated conversation. There was nothing where we were like at eye to eye, blow to blows, looking for something confrontational. I was sitting there, she was sitting there. Next thing I know, she got up. She came into the room.
Okay, she got up. She didn't have to. She say anything?
Not a word.
Okay.
She went into the bedroom. She came back out. She said, Russell, I'm going to shoot you. I put my hands up and said, Steph, what are you, crazy? No.
Is the gun cocked or not cocked?
The gun was cocked. A shot went off. At that point, I was in
You looking at her when the shot went off?
eye to eye.
No, I mean, looking at still my gun on you. You
I
looking at
was looking at her, yes. I was looking at her.
So they're just talking calmly about Stephanie's ex making an offer for her to come back to Phoenix and work it out. Russell isn't upset. Stephanie isn't upset. There was no argument. And then she went and got a gun and pointed it at him. We're missing something in the story. They're asking Russell for details about the call, about the conversation, but he doesn't really know them. And so he was asked again, do you think you were impaired at the time? And Russell now says, yeah, I may have been slightly impaired, only because it now gives him an excuse for not remembering things clearly, even though in his first interview and at the start of this interview, he said he was not impaired. Russell was asked what happened after Stephanie cocked the gun again. Remember, she goes at him in the living room. Russell, I'm going to shoot you. She shoots off at him. She cocks the gun again, and then she went into the bedroom. And Russell tries to walk them through it because they're like, okay, she cocked the gun again. She walked into the bedroom. What happened now? And he tries to give them, I guess, the next steps. He tries.
And so as I walked, it all happened so fast. I mean, you guys have the ability to check the powder residue or whatever. The gun was never on my hand.
As Russell says, the cops have the ability to check the powder residue or whatever. He's talking about gunpowder residue. And he asserts the gun was never on his hand, which I also think is a weird way to say it. The gun was never in my hand. I think he's trying to say that during the alleged struggle he talked about in his first interview, the gun was never on his hand. The police do have that ability, right? But did they use it on Russell? No, they did not. A GSR test was never performed on Russell Peterson after he was present during the shooting of his girlfriend, who he admitted to having an argument with, who he admitted to struggling over the gun with when it went off. If, as he says, there was a struggle for the gun at the time it went off, it's likely there would have been some gunshot residue on his hands, but the police never checked, and we're going to talk about that more later.
There may or may not have been a scuffle. As I think we might have scuffled a little bit, and then it went off. And then she dropped it.
What happened to the gun?
The gun fell. The gun fell to the ground.
Which side of her?
It would have had to have been the right-hand side of her, I believe. The left-hand side of her.
Towards the closet or towards
Away from the closet.
towards the bed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that would have been your left.
Yes.
Her right.
Her right. Absolutely.
There was a long pause when the police asked which side the gun had dropped on. And this is meaning after the second shot went off, which side did the gun drop on? But they all eventually agree that it was Stephanie's right side because, of course, Stephanie was right-handed, so she would have had to have been holding the gun in her right hand, the hand without gunshot residue on it. Russell then says he saw his daughter Christina in the hallway, so she couldn't have been there for more than a few seconds, but he didn't know if she had seen the whole thing or not.
She looked right up at me and she said, "You killed Mom when I was dead." And I said, "No, I did not kill her. I go back into your room." And I got very nervous. I mean, people who've never put in this situation, you cannot explain the anxiety, what's going through everything. So I looked down, and like I told you before, I picked up the gun, I put it in the closet.
Where was the holster?
I think the holster was either in the closet or it could have been on the bed.
Long pauses when asked about where the holster was. By the way, because if you remember in the first interview, when asked where the holster was, Russell replied, quote, "The holster was on the floor. The holster was on the floor," end quote. Now the holster was in the closet or on the bed.
Was anything said in the bedroom when you went in there?
I don't think so. I don't think there was a word said in the bedroom.
Really, Russell? Because I thought you said that when you went into the bedroom, Stephanie said, I'm going to kill you, Russell. Remember, she said, I'm going to shoot you in the living room. And then when you went in the bedroom, she said, I'm going to kill you. And I get that it's all happened so fast, but those are words you would probably remember. They were words you remembered the day before when you talked to the police for the first time. The police then asked Russell for specifics about who was standing where and what happened when he followed Stephanie into the bedroom.
Sir, I wish look at you as ever right now and saying, I know, I don't know. It happened. What happened? Within no seconds, or so fast. I don't know.
Okay, Russell doesn't remember. He wants to help the police, but he just can't remember. Except this is what he says seconds after making that statement.
All I remember is I walked down the hall. As I was coming through, I heard another shot.
You told us the other day you grabbed a wrist.
I thought I did. I mean, I'm not lying. I'm not lying. I'm going to say I may or may not have. I don't know. If what comes back from, I mean, if there were bruises or anything, it would show. It would hit some little thing that just stops your mind. I don't know. I told you there was a confrontation over there. Yeah, I remember you asking me, well, where was the gun? Where was it in relation to her and everything else?
So now, Russell says he was coming down the hall and he heard the shot and Stephanie dropped. And the police were like, hey, hold on. You told us you grabbed her wrists. You told us you wrestled over the gun. The story has changed. Now there's no, I'm going to kill you, Russell. There was no struggle over the gun. I mean, depending on what the GSR tests say, of course, the story has completely changed. The police told Russell, we're trying to figure this all out. How she got the gun, how she was holding it. I mean, she was shot in the neck. We need to know. They asked Russell, when you came around the corner, what happened? Which hand did she have the gun in? Was she waving it around? What do you remember?
Officers, I swear to God, as I came around the corner after what just happened, with how everything was just like, no, this was.
Did you ever have possession?
I never had possession of a gun. The only time I took possession of a gun, and I was honest with you before, and I'll tell you the same way I'll tell you now. Once she fell down, and I looked down, I saw what happened. And I saw the gun that was sitting next to her. I got very nervous. I did not know what to do. I picked it up, I put it in the closet, I put it in the holster. I said, don't put it in the closet in the holster. I mean, it does not make sense. I put it back down. I called 911 and said I needed a lot of help. I said they're a very bad answer.
What it sounds like is that Russell was trying to stage the scene and he had to talk some sense into himself. Like, how would the gun end up back in the holster and the closet after all of this? But where was the holster, Russell? Was it on the floor? Was it on the bed? Was it in the closet? Where was it? Because you've said it was 3 different places. But if you pick the gun up and you put it back in the holster, and you can remember doing that, you'd think you'd remember where the holster was. Russell, it sounds like to me, allegedly, just my opinion, don't come for me, it sounds like he's trying to stage the scene, and this part of what he's telling the police is true. Like, I picked the gun up, I put it back in the holster, I put it in the closet, and then I was like, what? No, what? If I'm trying to make it look like she took her own life, that doesn't make sense, silly Russell. What are you doing? Put it back. Put it back where you found it. Where did you find it? I can't remember anything. The police asked him again, how long did it take for you to call 911? And Russell says, maybe a minute and a half.
Wasn't 5 minutes. No, it was nothing like that whatsoever. How do you determine time when you're in an environment where something like this just happened? You're flabbergasted, you're lost for words, you don't know what happened. I mean, it just...
Russell is then asked a very important question.
Excuse yourself.
I believe in my own mind, after having a day to sleep, that after she had pointed at me, and I said to her, look, Stephanie, what's going on? Where's this? That she took the shot. And there was, from that point, no hesitation to like turn around, walk, and go right into the bathroom. I think she committed suicide.
So the bathroom, or she went to bed?
I'm sorry. The bathroom.
After all that talk about struggles and grabbing her wrists and where she was standing and where you were standing, a few hours of sleep has completely changed Russell's memory of what happened. He believes now Stephanie took her own life.
I think from the pain that she had point in her life, being someone what she has told me, coming from a reasonably to very unreasonable, unstable background, set her off the edge. I don't know. I don't have the answers, gentlemen.
Is anyone buying this right now? As we're listening to this, as we're talking about, is anyone buying this? I'm not buying this. Now, here's the thing. The police are even like, what the hell just happened? Whoa, we just really switched gears here. Like, we were on this path heading through the forest, and now you got us on a mountain path going up, and we don't know where we're going. And they say they have some questions. And I was like, yeah, you have some questions. Get his ass. Get his ass. But they don't ask him questions about why his story just totally changed. They also changed the topic, which I don't know if this was a legitimate sort of like detective questioning tactic or if they just really didn't know what the hell to make about what just happened. I think they're putting his changing story in the back burner. They're not forgetting it, trust me. But they changed the topic altogether and they ask him, where did the money for the school come from? The school that Russell is going in to for 2 weeks at Cornell for a taste of the cordon bleu. Now, I was mad for a second that they didn't call him out, but then I realized that this line of questioning is actually important. Where did you get this money, this $4,000 for this school? $4,000 is a lot of money now. We can all admit that, I hope. $4,000, not pocket change. But back in 1993, it was a lot of money and would have the same purchasing power as almost $9,000 today. We know that Stephanie was already worried about finances. She had verbalized that to people. People told that to the police. On July 12th of 1993, the police talked to a then 10-year-old Nicole who told them that her mother was a little upset about the money that Russell was spending at cooking school. She also said that when Russell drank too much, he bumped into things, but, that's just a fun little fact. Russell said it was his vacation money that he paid for the school with. He's then told that the police have talked to people and they've gathered that Stephanie was not really happy about Russell going to the school, to the point where she was going to find a way to make it so that he couldn't go.
Maybe this was her way. I mean,
Is that so?
in a sick manner, yes, that this was the one and only way. I mean, especially after the day before, I got my hair cut. I mean, my knives, if you check my house, the set of Hinkles are sitting right over there, all brand new and a leather set. You saw the plane tickets. There were $650 in there, which was my last paycheck. I was getting another paycheck come Friday. She was going to get another check of mine come this Wednesday, not only plus the money she makes, plus the $250 that are in a savings account, and $80 to $100 in checking. So she had $1,000 and change dollars to play with while she worked while I was gone.
Yes, Russell. Stephanie killed herself, took away her own life because that was the only way she could make sure you didn't leave for 2 weeks. All the pieces are falling into place now. You are just that damn magnetic that a woman would rather be without her children, her family, her life forever than be without you for 2 weeks. It makes sense now. In her own twisted way, this was what she did. And now, let's do the math, because Russell wants to make sure the police know that this was not a financial burden for Stephanie. He says that, with his plane tickets, the police would see there was also $650 there, also his last paycheck. He then says he has another paycheck coming on Friday and then another one coming on Wednesday, which Stephanie would get. I'm confused because Stephanie was killed in the early morning hours of July 9th, which was a Friday. The police are talking to Russell on July 10th, a Saturday. So he says his last paycheck is with his plane tickets, either in cash or check form, I don't know. But he came home from work on Thursday, July 8th. So when did he get his last paycheck? Was that his paycheck from last Friday, which means you have now not supplemented the household with money for almost a week because you're bringing your last paycheck with you to New York. And then his next paycheck is coming on Friday. That makes sense. And then another one on Wednesday. That's 3 paychecks in the space of 1 week or a week and a half. So either his last paycheck that was with his plane tickets was from the week previous, and he was just saving it to bring with him to New York. And then he's going to get another one the following Friday, which would be his most current paycheck. And then maybe the one that was coming on Wednesday would be the paycheck that he'd usually be getting. You know how like when you start work, you don't get paid for a week because if you quit or get fired or whatever, they want you to still have a paycheck coming. And with Russell not working for 2 weeks, maybe that's what that paycheck coming on Wednesday would be. But why is it coming on Wednesday and not Friday? None of that makes sense to me. Then Russell says that Stephanie also has the money she makes, which we have no idea how much that was, plus $250 in her savings account and like $80 or $90 in the checking account. Russell then does some weird math and claims that this gives Stephanie $1,000 to play with while he's gone for 2 weeks. First of all, money in a savings account is usually there because it's being saved for something, like for taxes or emergencies, unexpected things that you don't budget in, like your water heater going or car work or something like that. Like your car breaks down, you got to fix it. No one is playing with money in their savings account. No one should be. No one with children who's an adult is playing with money in their savings account. Second of all, under $100 in a checking account is not that much, not just for playing with, but for actual expenses like rent, food, bills, gas, childcare expenses, etc. I don't know exactly how much in rent they were paying for that house on Coffee Pot Drive, but I looked into it, and in Sedona in 1993, a 2-bedroom house would cost you anywhere from $450 a month on the low end to $750 a month on the high end. Sedona has long been a small resort town with a really desirable climate and scenery. This Coffee Pot Drive house was located in a nice area where like you could look outside and see like the mountains and the canyons and stuff. So being fair, let's say they were paying $600 a month. And are they having to pay someone to watch Nicole and Christina while Stephanie and Russell are at work? I mean, the expenses of a small family add up quickly. And since we don't actually know how much money Stephanie was being left with, but we do know she was financially stressed, how honest is Russell being here? Even if he's being honest about what's in the bank accounts. Not that there's any evidence the police ever checked into that. That's still not an amount of money someone would feel safe with, especially if your partner was taking 2 weeks off unpaid from work to fly off to some 2-week course that, as it turns out, he probably could have waited to do until they were more financially comfortable, right? So he's not going to get paid for 2 weeks while he's there. So Russell's going to come back and not get a paycheck for 2 weeks. Additionally, although it's never been proven by the police because once again, there's no sign that they actually looked into the finances, word of mouth around Stephanie's family was that she'd been saving for quite a while to bring her daughters to Disneyland. And it was this money that Russell took in order to pay for this course. This information comes from Stephanie's sisters, and even if it's not totally true, which I think it's true because Russell says he used his vacation money. What vacation money? But even if it's not totally true that he took the saved Disneyland money to pay for the school, Russell using $4,000 of the family money and then foregoing a paycheck for 2 weeks would be a huge financial blow to that household, really to any household. And I don't understand why he keeps trying to make it seem like this wasn't a financial burden. Of course it was. The police asked Russell this. They say, hey, did that create a big financial burden for you? Was she mad that you were going to this important school and you couldn't afford it? He says, no, there was no financial burden. The police then clarified. They say that the school tuition was $4,000 because remember, that is what he said. Russell told us all and the police in his first interview, it was $4,000. This is Russell's response.
The school tuition was $4,000.
No, the school tuition was $2,500 for both weeks combined. There was a preliminary week, and then there was a week that is an intensive course. And I figured as long as I was accepted, and as long as I'm going to go, because I have not really had a background in French food, that to go through that preliminary week would make me that much stronger to go through the next week. Okay.
And the police respond to him and they say, okay. They never ask him why he told them it was $4,000 before. Maybe he said $4,000 to factor in traveling expenses, hotel, food, and stuff while he was out there, but he did say $4,000. Also, let's now examine this new wrinkle that we have been presented with. The course was broken up into 2 weeks. 2 weeks. There was a preliminary week, and he figured since he was already accepted, he should just do both weeks. Once again, from all the research I've done and from all the people at Cornell that I've talked to, this was not an accepted kind of thing. This was a pay and enroll type of thing. Like if there was space for you, you could pay the money and you could go to the course. Russell did not have to attend both weeks, and both weeks would have cost more. He could have only gone for 1 week. The police never question him about any of this. They never bring his attention back to the discrepancy of the money. They never even check the financial accounts to make sure that Russell was actually not leaving Stephanie in a bad financial position. Russell then goes on a long rant about how Stephanie didn't want him to go, and it all stems back to when they first got together and he brought her to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Be ready for this side quest.
It's not that she did not want me to go. It's because of the fact that when we kind of first got together and when I brought her to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where I was in charge of the White Front Club via John DiTomaso, who has an art gallery in Scottsdale, another one in Jackson. I always told her, because of maybe my age, because of maybe what I have done, that, I had worked with people who came out of culinary schools that they banked so much on a piece of paper that they thought that they can come out and make their $40,000 or $50,000 a year because they've got this. And I always told her, no, the piece of paper means nothing. It's in the knowledge. Okay, that was 6-7 years ago. Now that I have the knowledge and have never had the ability to have that piece of paper, this means not only something to me, but it means something to you, because anything I go there and do, I am going to translate and give you the ability to do that same thing, whether it be a nice loaf, a French baguette, the right kind of tart pastry shell, that doesn't matter.
I mean, I guess I see the point that Russell was self-taught and he watched his peers get degrees from cooking schools and he just kept his head down and worked hard and became rich in experience, but now he does want that piece of paper. But this was a 2-week course that you paid to go to. That piece of paper, as Russell calls it, means even less than the piece of paper your peers received from going to actual cooking school, the one that you were judging them for. Like, that doesn't matter. You paid $50,000 for that piece of paper. They paid $50,000 in tuition, and they did have to be accepted. So they had to be accepted, and then they had to pay for the tuition, and it took them a long time, more than 2 weeks, right? And now you're saying, well, I wanted that piece of paper. Now that I was rich in experience and talent, I wanted that piece of paper. That piece of paper meant nothing, less than nothing. Then Russell tries to tie it back to how him going to this thing was going to benefit both him and Stephanie because he could bring back his baguette knowledge to her and improve her pastry chef skills. It's top-tier gaslighting. The police then ask him, okay, so are you saying that maybe this was jealousy or like resentment? She wanted to go to this school and she was mad that you were getting the opportunity? And Russell's like, yeah, that's right. Good one, police. She wanted to go. She was mad. The police then clarify, but this is an accepted thing, right? You have to be accepted. And listen to Russell do his verbal gymnastics routine.
Well, it's an accepted thing, and considering that I hate to go back to that old moral philosophy, but I am the breadwinner of the house. I'm not leaving you high and dry. I'm not leaving you with I'm leaving you with more than the ability to get along for 2 weeks.
Yeah. It's an accepted thing. Now let me change the subject and talk about something else, like how good I am and I'm the breadwinner and I left her with more than enough money. I'd rather talk about the financial burden again than talk about how this was an accepted thing, because it wasn't. It wasn't. I want to talk about something else so I don't have to elaborate on how it really isn't an accepted thing in the way I'm making you think that it is an accepted thing. And you may be wondering, Stephanie, why are you harping on this? Why is this important? It is important. It's important to my final thoughts. It's all going to tie together, I promise. So the police then go back to Stephanie's ex, Craig Daly, again. They want to know if maybe Stephanie was trying to make Russell think that she was going to leave him for her ex if he went to Cornell. Maybe it was another way of trying to stop Russell from going. They asked Russell, does that not make you angry? Russell immediately goes back into his savior complex role.
That doesn't make you angry.
Telling the truth, no. Does not make me... makes me question, Stephanie, have not I taken you out of the environment where you're at with Craig, which was a relationship documented of abuse, of all kinds of different things, all the way down through her mother, where she was 10 or 11 when she started to grow arrests or whatever sent her to a home for 2 years of her life where she never was visited for Christmas, birthdays, or anything else. She had a lot of things that she would project, project onto others who were around because of her own insecurities. Unless you can feel comfortable with yourself, how can you feel comfortable with others?
I swear to God, I guarantee you that Russell said these things to Stephanie. Like every time she'd bring up an issue with him, he was like, "These are your own insecurities being projected at me." And the blind rage I would feel at some man trying to sound smart and gaslight me while also saying the word insecurities incorrectly, I can't even tell you. The blind rage and the audacity, right, that I would feel like in that situation is just, it's hard to explain. So by the way, no documented abuse in the relationship with Stephanie and her ex Craig. And for Russell to say earlier that Stephanie didn't really talk about her past and she kept a lid on all of that, once again, he sure does seem to know a lot about these horrible and traumatic circumstances that Stephanie went through in her early life. I really wish that I could play this whole interview because there's so much to dissect in Russell's words and the way he says things. So much, but we don't have a time. This guy goes on a minutes-long monologue, uninterrupted by the police, about Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and how he worked for this guy who owns art galleries, but this restaurant was actually the guy's wife's restaurant. Her name was Annie, and Russell was working so hard for Annie, but the place wasn't doing what it should be doing, and he had to really help little Annie make it happen. And then she screwed him over. All right, maybe I can play you a little bit of it, just for fun, just so you see what I mean.
I took her out of that environment. We went from there to Jackson, Wyoming, where we spent 15, 18, 22 months in a magnificent $1.5 million restaurant. Second to none. It's just too bad that it was built in a town of 4,200 people. And it was like museum in quality. The restaurant didn't fail. It changed. The restaurant was open. John DiTomaso, who owns DiTomaso Galleries on Main Street, okay? I would say open this to give his wife, Anne, an opportunity to have something to do. Because she never, aside from dealing with kids, had never really anything to do with her life. So this was Annie's baby. And anytime you have to go to somebody who's in a position of authority where you know what you know and approach her with, well, Anne, should we do this? Should we do that? What do you think? And she says, well, I don't know. Give me a day. We actually caught Anne one time, and the ladies, Gina Casanova, Don Casanova's wife, who now lives in Wisconsin, caught Anne DiTomaso in the stall, literally tearing her hair out. Because the facility was more than the town commanded and could support. So I sat down with Anne, and I told her that, look, I'll keep your place open. I'll do lunch. I'll do dinner. I'll do whatever I have to do for you to keep this place open. I already have a 2-week paid vacation coming to me. Upon that fact of closing, all I want is to be paid for the remainder of the time that you're closed, which would basically be an extra 4 weeks paid vacation. From what I saved them out of money in the kitchen, it was a drop in the pocket. That was agreed upon. I sit down with Ann in the office and I say, Ann, okay, I've done my part. I've kept you open. We've made it through this 3 months. How do you want to do this? Do you want to give me 1 2-week check? Do you want to send me a check every week? Do you want to give me one lump sum? And she turns around and looks at me square in the eye and says, Russell, I don't believe that you lived up to the standards and performances that we expected from you. So therefore, we'll give you your 2-week vacation, but above and beyond that, we are going to restaff this restaurant and have that kind of downfall. Now, I won't say downfall, but have somebody tell you didn't put forth. Well, I was there 7 days. I mean, you did do lunch and dinner 7 days a week, didn't you? Who else did it? You had elves who came in, did all the prep work. I called John down in Phoenix where he was at the gallery, and I explained to him what his wife had done. He said, Russell, do yourself a favor. Come down to Phoenix. I came down with Stephanie. Tell me what you feel is owed to you, and I will give you whatever we can both agree on.
I mean, Russell is a character from Goodfellas, or he thinks he is. John Tommaso, Don and Gina Casanova. Annie's pulling her hair out in the stall. Russell comes in, he saves her, but she's, unappreciative. He's unappreciated. She doesn't respect the code of the kitchen or his masculine energy. He's got to call her husband, who makes things right as to not invoke the wrath of the family. His stories have all the drama and details that make for a very interesting ride. But drama and details that no one asked for, right? No one. And it's a very clear sort of pattern. Russell is always trying to save these women, and they don't appreciate him for it. The police are talking to Russell about why your girlfriend is dead, and what motive could you potentially have had to do this to her. No one asked for any of this Jackson Hole stuff, and I cut a lot of stuff out. This went on and on and on. I wanted you to see what a bullshitter he was, and I'm sure we all know someone like Russell Peterson. I certainly do. And the detectives at this point, bless their hearts, they let him go on and talk until they finally tell him, okay, back to the matter at hand. Your girlfriend, who hasn't even been dead 48 hours yet. They have to bring him back. They let him go on his Jackson Hole rant, and they're like, all right, that was fun, Russell. So let's talk about Stephanie again. And they tell Russell, listen, yesterday you said you struggled over the gun. You grabbed her wrist. Today you're saying she shot herself.
Did you see her shoot herself?
It might sound lame to you, and I don't want to sound that way. I think of a confrontation as after you looked at her body. I mean, you took pictures of me and everything else. I might be contradicting the fact of I might have saw her shoot herself. And that's why there's this complete and total, just wall. A wall. I'm looking at you square in the eye. I don't know. I think there was a confrontation. There might not have been a confrontation. I do believe I told you that.
He says it might sound like a contradiction. Yes, it does sound like that because it is. It's a contradiction. It's completely different than what you said before, what you said the day before.
I would not want you to lie to me under any circumstances. But all I'm saying, as an investigator, the other day you tell us there's a struggle. Today, not the other day, yesterday.
Yesterday, that's what I told you.
Today you tell us, I don't know, she may have shot herself.
I'll tell you the truth, officer. I went on tape, and I'm on tape now. And no, I was not under the influence of drugs. I was not impaired. I'm not blaming anything I said at that point in time. Anything. I was, if I tell you, numb. Numb. Numb, not because of anything, numb just because of the extent of everything. And I went back there today, and even as we went over there yesterday, you told me you needed my change of clothes and everything, which I gave you, which was no problem. I truly seek and I rip inside myself to look back and say, what?
Did you say you went over there today?
Yes, I did go over there today.
Yes, Russell went back to the house that day, the 10th. He's got his reasons, but basically what happened is he called a locksmith so that he was able to get back into the house. And the police are like, well, why? Because we locked the house up and we gave the key to your mother yesterday. And Russell was like, well, she's back in Phoenix. The police do not understand why Russell's mother would take the house key back with her to Phoenix. They don't understand why Russell would have had to have called a locksmith and have the locks changed to get into that house.
To be honest with you, Russ, with the trajectory, the way she was shot at that back, if she in fact was going to shoot herself.
Mm-hmm.
If there's some kind of struggle, some of that can make a little bit more sense.
I mean, I told you last night that I thought there was a struggle, and there very well may have been a struggle. I can't.
Have you ever taken any martial arts courses?
Never taken anything.
If you were going to try to get a gun out of my hand, how do you think you would do it?
I would have no idea, way, shape, or form to even consider wanting to take it out of your hand.
If you're going to take it out of her hand, just talk. How would you try to take it out of her hand? Do you think?
Legitimately and honestly, you don't know.
What the police are trying to do here, and I don't know if it's intentional. I'm not going to say that it is, and I'm not going to say that it isn't. I'm going to talk Russell speak. It may or it may not be intentional or not intentional. But what they're trying to do here, in my opinion, is they're trying to tell Russell that with his changing story, the trajectory of the bullet does not work. If there had been a struggle and they both had their hands on the gun, that might work. But now that Russell is changing the whole scenario, there's no way it works. I don't know if they're trying to lead him to go back to his old story so that they can just write this off as an accident and go on with their lives. But if that is what the police are trying to do, Russell doesn't pick up on it. He's probably feeling paranoid. He probably felt like they were trying to get him to admit to having been the one to shoot the gun, trying to put his hands on the weapon, like the police are trying to put his hands on the weapon when it went off. So he just went with his good old word salad, might have been, might not have been, standby story. And this goes on for another 20, 30 minutes. Russell keeps going back over it. He got home. Stephanie told him to take a shower. Well, actually, she said, "You stink. Take a shower, you smelly boy." He got out of the shower. They talked. She got up, got the gun, shot at him, walked back into the bedroom. And that's where he totally loses his memory. Hits a wall, as he calls it. He says, "Maybe I did see her shoot herself. Maybe I just can't accept it. Hate to tell you that I don't know because I should know, but it all happened so fast. I was walking through the hallway. I was entering the room. I heard a shot." The police say, "Hey, listen, Russell, why don't you take a few days and think about it?"
Yeah, hold on. I don't think I'm trying to hound you. No, I know there's no hounding. We're just trying to. No, you don't know something you guys need to know. Her parents need to know. Everybody around needs to know. And nothing is going to make. And like I said, I understand where the police, yeah, you did. Yeah, so you shot her. Not the personal. We're going to put you in jail. Mm-hmm. If you did, and it is what you're saying. Basically, somebody else makes the charging decisions. But we just want to know the truth. I swear to God, I've been telling you the truth. And there's, I do not have to fight you myself. I just have, the questions we have. It's obvious. Yesterday, you say grab her wrist. There was a confrontation. There could have been. There might not have been. And then, that's like you guys said. At one point where there's the biggest discrepancy. I'm telling you, what we know of the angle and the trajectory of the wound. What's Stephanie? I have no. What was the angle? What was the trajectory? That's why I'm trying to. That can't feed you that right now because I have to. Oh, okay. And I want you to tell me what happened. So yeah. So we can try to answer those. I swear to God, I don't know. I don't know where she got shot. I heard that thing go off and she just dropped right to the ground.
But where were you when the gun went off and she dropped to the ground? If you were in the hallway or walking into the room, then there was no struggle because you weren't close enough, right? But if you were right in front of Stephanie and your hands were on her wrists, like you said earlier, then there potentially and definitely was. And the police keep saying, "This trajectory, man, it's a problem." And Russell asks them, "Well, what was the trajectory?" And the police are like, "We can't feed that to you right now. If we told you that, then you could tailor your story around it. Then maybe your memory would suddenly be clear and that wall would just fall right over." Russell's trying to get more information from the police so that he can modify his story to fit the evidence. He's clearly trying to do that. They know he's trying to do that, and yet this man will never be arrested or charged. During this interview, Russell says multiple times that he's willing to do anything. He will take a polygraph. He will go under hypnosis, whatever it takes. He wants to help, after all. And the police tell him that they're going to schedule a polygraph. But Russell Peterson will never take a polygraph because later he changes his mind and he decides he doesn't want to. He's not willing to do whatever it takes. I also want to go back to the police report where it says the police spoke with Stephanie's sister Wendy on July 30th. Wendy told the police that she had talked to Russell on July 26th, and at that time he had told her that Stephanie had taken a shot at him, and then when he followed her into the bedroom, he found her on the bed, dead, and he told Wendy that he didn't hear the second shot. Which is interesting because that's not at all what the crime scene shows, right? What now, Stephanie's on the bed dead? You didn't hear the second shot? Russell also told Wendy that the police had told him they had enough evidence and information to the point where they did not need him to take a polygraph or take part in a reconstruction of the incident. The police report says, quote, "It should be noted that law enforcement did not advise Mr. Peterson that we did not need him to do the reconstruction or the polygraph test," end quote. All right, so this second interview conducted on July 10th, 1993 is over. The following day, July 11th, Russell Peterson called the Sedona Police Department and requested that the detectives meet him at the Coffee Pot Drive house as soon as possible because he wanted to go over the events again. The detectives were there within 20 minutes of the call, and when they arrived, they found not only Russell, but his boss and good friend, Peter Korn.
Okay, what I was, the first thing I never really noticed was the trajectory of this bullet, which I didn't see until last night before the curtains were there and everything else.
So now Russell's like, hey, I learned all about trajectory last night after I talked to you guys and you kept saying that word. And then I came here to check out this trajectory and do a crime scene analysis to see if it jogs my memory.
I'm here. Stephanie gets up. She goes into the bedroom, which was not uncommon. Could have gone in there to pee because that was her bathroom. Maybe her head and clothes were dry, whatever. She comes back out and standing right in the general area where the light switch would be, where in our house. She looks at me, I look up at her, and she says, "Russell, I'm going to shoot you." I put my hands up and say, "Stephanie, stop, wait, Mom, what's going on?" The shot was fired. There was complete and total silence from that point. She turned around. I can't say I looked up at her, and I really don't think she looked back at me. When we're sitting here, if I were to stand up and say, "Stephanie, no, I'm done." That, like I said, there was complete silence. She turned around. I did hear the gun cocked again. Now, Harry, a minute, maybe a minute and a half. And finally, I mean, there was silence in the bedroom, and I'm completely silent out here, aside from what was ever on TV. I have no idea. So I get up, I walk, into this other hallway, and I do believe, I know I told you guys before that I thought there was a struggle. Well, if there was, how did you grab her wrists and everything else? What makes me come to this conclusion or determination is, as I'm about here, the shot was fired, and I remember distinctly seeing her. I can see it. I can see exactly how she fell. I mean, wasn't a drop like this, or I mean, it was just like a sink. Boom. And I saw her head hit off of this and came to rest under the counter, under the table. You know, the thing that really came to me the most is after me and my brother were here and we talked and I broke down and I gathered myself and everything else, and he like drilled me. So what was it, Russell? What was it, Russell? What did you see? What do you remember? Point being that being anywhere from about here to here, and the way it comes back that I saw her drop, that I saw her legs just buckle underneath her and just go and come to rest underneath that table.
Suddenly, Russell remembers so many details. After a second thought, after going back to the house, after learning about trajectory, after talking to his brother about it, Russell now realizes there absolutely was no struggle, and he heard the second shot as he approached the door of the bedroom. I want to now ask the question, what is the most likely explanation for Russell relating different versions of events over the course of 3 days, and his memory of the night in question becoming clearer as he got further away from the incident? Because as we know, and as the police will tell him later, memory clarity usually degrades over time. It doesn't improve. We can acknowledge that things like acute stress and trauma have an effect on memory, and this can cause things like having a tough time remembering the sequence of events, maybe even unintentionally filling in the gaps incorrectly. However, trauma-related memory gaps usually show up as small inconsistencies, gaps in the timeline, and confusion that persists or fluctuates for a little while, not just like a day or two. So for instance, during the first interview, Russell could say, "I heard a bang," and she was on the floor. I don't remember exactly where I was was standing. I keep seeing pieces of it, but I can't put them together. And then during the second interview, Russell could say, I think I was closer to the doorway, but I'm honestly not sure. I keep replaying it, and sometimes I think I moved towards her. Sometimes I don't. I just know I heard the shot and she fell. And then during the third interview, Russell might say, I really still can't say for sure if I was stepping into the room or already in the room. I wish I could be clearer, but I really don't know. The more I think about it, the less certain I feel. That's what you would see with trauma-related memory gaps. What you do not usually see in genuine trauma recall is a clean timeline emerging days later, absolute certainty replacing doubt, physically incriminating details disappearing one by one, and language shifting from I think, I don't know, to now I know for sure. There's also the possibility of something called post-event reconstruction or memory contamination, which these are, very real phenomenons. Human memory is in fact not static. It's reconstructed every time it's recalled. So during the days following an incident like this, memory can be altered by repeated retelling, internal rehearsals, such as asking yourself, well, what if it happened this way? Even exposure to implications of legal risk, right? Understanding what the truth might mean for you, or hearing others' thoughts and interpretations of what they think might have happened, etc. So by day 3, Russell may have genuinely believed the newer version of the story because he'd been repeating it internally. It made emotional sense, and it aligned with his survival instincts of not going to prison. It also reduced cognitive dissonance of his potential responsibility and implicating himself legally. For this to happen, it didn't require Russell to be consciously lying, but it would require him to be self-editing. Now, it is entirely possible that Russell was telling a closer version of truth during his first police interview. We struggled over the gun, I grabbed her wrists, etc. And at that time, he didn't realize the legal implications. He didn't understand how the word struggle might be interpreted or the forensic implications of his close proximity to Stephanie when she was shot. As he processed the situation through repeated interviews with law enforcement and a realization that he was being treated as a suspect, because in the last interview, they're like, we'll throw you in jail, man. We got no problem. As he's realizing the stakes, Russell may have realized that being in the doorway when the shot went off was a much safer place to put himself than directly in front of Stephanie with his hands on her. There's a very important distinction between recovering a memory and settling on a story. Frequently in high-stakes police interviews, we see something called narrative consolidation. Russell may have mentally tested out multiple scenarios. One of those scenarios stuck, and as he repeated it over and over, his confidence in that scenario got stronger. So by day 3, by interview 3, Russell may not necessarily be remembering better. He may have told himself the same version of the story enough times that it felt true, or it started to feel true. Here's the thing. In genuine memory recovery, we would expect to see more nuance, more uncertainty, occasional corrections, and yes, also a continued acknowledgement of doubt every now and then. Like, I'm still a little iffy. What we don't expect to see is absolute certainty emerging days later. Removal of incriminating details that have already been stated, and physical proximity increasing over time. Like he initially said, he was right in front of her. They were both in front of the closet. He wrestled with her over the gun, etc. All of a sudden, he's at the door jamb when the shot went off. In my opinion, allegedly, don't come for me, just my opinion. None of what we just talked about was happening with Russell. I think he was lying. I don't think this was I accidentally just, was afraid of getting arrested and so I made myself believe something. No, I think he's lying. There's a clear trajectory throughout these 3 interviews. Interview 1, Russell's story is the most incriminating and I think the most true. He said there was a struggle over the gun. Interview 2, he was wishy-washy. Now he's not sure if there was a struggle. There may have been, there may not have been. Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Interview 3, Russell tells his least incriminating story, and he does so with almost absolute certainty. There was never a struggle. I wasn't anywhere near her. I was at the door of the room. How could I have struggled with her? How could I have touched her? Memory errors tend to be messy, but this progression was not messy so much as strategic. This is one of the strongest indicators that investigators look for because people with genuine memory gaps become less confident over time. They qualify their statements more. They admit that they still have doubt, but Russell's certainty about what happened becomes stronger as the legal consequences become clearer to him, as the weight of the situation began to sink in, and he had time to think about all that he had said and all that the police had said to him. And that pattern, my friends, aligns far more with intentional revision than memory recovery. It's pretty standard in these kinds of investigations that the earliest statement is usually the most truthful because it happens before the reality of the situation sets in, before full legal awareness, before defensive framing, and the soonest in timing to the actual event that you're supposed to be describing. So what's the most likely explanation, in my opinion? My opinion only. Russell initially told the truth, or the closest version of it, and then he realized how damaging it was, and then he progressively revised the story to reduce his exposure. He possibly even eventually convinced himself of the final version, but I don't think so. Now, before I play this next clip for you, I want to remind you that when Russell had talked to the police the day before, he had informed them that he'd gone to the house without the house key, and he had to bring in a locksmith because he didn't have the key. He said this was because Stephanie's brother or something wanted some of her things or her truck or whatever. That's not what's important here. What's important is that Russell went back to the house.
I also found another piece of, if you want to call it evidence, that yesterday, before me and my brother went through all this, my mother had to go to the bathroom. She was using the front bathroom. My father had to go to the bathroom and over here. So Father Ken will show go to the bathroom. He comes in, he goes to pee, and he shuts the door. And he hears something in her red bag. As he lifts it up, I mean, you can take it for prints. I mean, it would show the volume that was consumed by
I know what was consumed exactly.
Oh, you've already got a
I know what alcohol was.
BAC on her or whatever.
Yeah.
But I just figured that, I found that. I had no idea.
Okay, so that's not a normal place where she would keep a bottle of Seagrams?
It's not normal. She used to like at times to hide them around to, like, shall we call it, her personal stash. But
Okay.
I never had any knowledge of this. And Father Ken, when he went to shut the door, then he called me and said, Russell, this is what was there.
Okay.
So that compounded with a couple of glasses of wine and the pressures of the fact of me doing this, which was no pressure on her really, going to Ithaca. And I think a key point that nobody will never know what transpired, how it transpired, is that 2.5 hour, very uncommon conversation between Craig and herself.
Right.
Am I saying that Russell went back to the house and planted a bottle of liquor in a red bag that belonged to Stephanie that his father just happened to find when he used the bathroom? I would have no way of knowing that, so of course I wouldn't say that. But would Russell believe that finding this bottle of alcohol would help his case, Stephanie being more intoxicated and more impaired than he had previously thought? Stephanie's daughter, Nicole, had told the police that on the night of July 8th, the last time she said goodnight to her mother, that when she'd gone up behind her and given her a hug and a kiss, Stephanie had been enjoying a drink. Russell said he and Stephanie had shared a bottle of wine, 2 glasses for her, 2 glasses for him. If Stephanie only had a single mixed drink or a single maybe straight drink of alcohol and 2 normal glasses of wine over about 2.5 hours, a BAC of 0.17 would be on the high side. Now that doesn't make it impossible. Pour, size, and strength of the drink matters a lot, but it does mean either the drinks were very strong, there was more alcohol than was accounted for. It could mean that Stephanie had consumed more alcohol than, Russell or Nicole knew. It is possible that Stephanie had more than one drink the night before Russell came home. We don't really know. And that's what makes Russell's late discovery of a hidden Seagram's bottle so significant. It conveniently fills the gap, and it appears only after he'd already been back inside the home. It also sets a narrative, not just a drinking narrative, a character narrative. The police asked Russell if this was a normal place for Stephanie to hide a bottle of Seagram's, and he answered, no, it wasn't normal, before going on to say that she would hide them around in certain places, her own personal stash. From what we know about Russell, he liked his alcohol, and he was often intoxicated, so why would Stephanie, an adult who lived in a home with another adult who routinely consumed alcohol, feel the need to hide bottles of Seagram's around? According to everyone, including Russell himself, he was hardly ever home, and this was something that Stephanie was unhappy about, so what is the reason that she would have to hide her drinking? He's not there, and she's an adult who's legally allowed to drink, and her boyfriend, who she lives with, also likes to drink. Why would she be hiding bottles of alcohol around? He's not home. She doesn't have to go in the bathroom and get a quick drink because her boyfriend's just with her 24/7. Russell telling the police that Stephanie hid alcohol isn't simply to show she drank alcohol. It was to show she was dishonest. She was sneaking and doing things behind his back, hiding things. Between her being intoxicated and the pressure on her from Russell going to Ithaca, New York, I guess she just put a gun to her neck in an unnatural way at an impossible angle and ended it all. Good thing Russell discovered this piece of evidence, if that's what you would call it, and he seems to know a lot of terms that would come up during a police investigation. He had talked to the police about powder testing. He's now talking about BAC, almost like he's been doing some researching over the last few days.
When you came around the corner,
When I came around the corner, I was in between. I would solemnly pretty much swear I was in between right about this area.
okay, so in the door jam itself, in the entryway.
Door jam area. You know, there were no words. The last words that Stephanie ever said to me was, "Russell, I am going to shoot you."
Remember, before Stephanie had said, "Russell, I'm going to shoot you," in the living room, and in the bedroom she had said, "Russell, I'm going to kill you." But now that part has completely dropped off. This next clip is the voice of, I believe, Peter Korn, and I find it very interesting. He's talking to the police. He's asking them some questions.
Have you ever just on a personal level, because I've been listening to this. Have you heard of cases where people wish to have, that's the way I see it. Just wish to have struggle with someone to stop them and imagine, I can't, and this I'd be following there.
I don't know. The only thing I have to go on is what's told.
Yeah, I understand. No, what I'm saying is that this particular kid, and so when I first told him, he said, I didn't know what happened, whether I struggled or not.
You know, I can, out of curiosity, what was it BAC? I can't remember. It was relatively high, I would imagine. I don't know. It's not.
I literally can't do it with these two guys. Peter Korn is like, "Hey, detective, now that Russell has finally gotten his story straight and settled on a version of events, have you ever, on a personal note, encountered someone who imagined that they struggled with the gun because they just wished so much that they had and that they could have stopped what happened?" The detective's like, "I don't know, man. I just know what these people tell me. They're usually lying." The detective didn't say that. I just added that in. I don't want to get sued or anything, but the detective's like, "I don't know, man. I'm just here to listen to what these people are telling me, put it all together." And then Russell pops in, trying to once again get information from the police. And he asks, "What was Stephanie's BAC, by the way, out of curiosity, innocent curiosity?" The detective's like, "Once again, dude, just like the trajectory, I can't tell you all that." Then Russell's like, "I imagine it was pretty high, huh? I mean, I know we're being recorded, and maybe you don't want to say that it was high, but do you want to give me an indication some way, man to man, make an eyebrow raise, a little wink? It was pretty high, right? Right? It was pretty high, huh?" If I'm the police talking to these two guys right now, and I've already talked to Russell Peterson way more than any sane person should have to, I'm going to be suspicious as fuck, okay? I'm not believing a thing this used car salesman is telling me. But once again, Russell Peterson was never arrested or charged with anything. But wait, there's more, because Russell's going to talk to the police one more time months later on September 9th, 1993. The police wanted Russell to once again go over the events that happened that night. You will be able to tell that whatever sadness or grief Russell may have attempted to portray during his early interviews has completely left the building, in my opinion. And in my opinion, Russell hated Stephanie. And I think he was feeling more emboldened in September because it had been months and he hadn't been arrested.
Yeah, let's start when you last talked to Stephanie.
She called me 3 times. In between 10 and 11:15 when I actually left. And it was very odd. The fact that she, once, okay, when you're coming home, to call me again when you're coming home, and to the repetition of it after the fact. Well, it leads me to believe, which I have believed from the start, that the conversation, something went on with the conversation. I'll give you my telephone bill that she had with Craig, and she called him back at 11:20, which was approximately when I did walk in the door.
Okay. If you do have that bill, I'd like a copy.
I'll give it to you. I'll give you a copy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Russell has consistently come back to this phone conversation that Stephanie had with her ex, Craig Daly. He kept calling it a very uncommon phone call, even though, remember, he always encouraged Stephanie to continue a relationship with her ex and it never bothered him. He now brings up the call to Craig that happened at 11:20 as he was walking through the door. Nikki asked her father about this call, and he said he never answered it. He was probably asleep by then. You will also remember that Craig told Nikki that Stephanie had told him that night that she knew Russell was recording her phone calls. She knew he was probably recording the phone call they were having at that moment, and she didn't care because she was leaving him. The police claimed to Nikki that they never found any phone recorders in the house, but also, how hard did they look? From the evidence collected, it appears that the investigation took place in two places at that house, the living room and the bedroom. There's really no indication that the police collected evidence from anywhere else. Russell talks about plane tickets to Ithaca. He said he would show those to the police. They didn't collect them during their investigation. It's not on the list of things they collected during their investigation. There is a list of things that they collected, all from the living room and mainly the bedroom. Nothing really from the living room besides, ballistics and the bullet casings and stuff. The police did collect some framed photographs from the bedroom, but only because those had blood spattered on them. Now, Russell went back to the house on the morning of the 9th. We remember he talked to the police his first interview. They brought him back to the house. He changed his clothes, gave them his clothes. He got some cash, and then he left. And then the police did some investigating, and then they locked up. But at that time, the morning of July 9th, the police were with him. So he's got to be careful. And then for some reason, he went back to that house again without the police. And he had the locks changed. He went back on the 10th of July, the day after his first interview, or technically, he had his first interview the early morning hours of July 9th, so he went back July 10th before they talked to him the second time. And he had the locks changed so he could get in, even though the police had given his mother the key to the house, which she had no reason to fly off to Phoenix with when she left Sedona. Now, Russell doesn't necessarily say that his mother took the key to Sedona. The police are just like, why did you go to what? We gave your mom the key. And Russell's like, well, she's back in Phoenix. He doesn't say like she took the key back to Phoenix. He just says she's back in Phoenix. But he's trying, that's the sort of thing he's trying to make us think, that she's back in Phoenix, so she took the key. Now, I don't think that Russell's mother flew back to Phoenix with the key to his house that the police had given her to give him. So why did Russell have the locks changed? Did Russell have the locks to the house changed so that no one else could get in besides him, in case he felt the police had made a copy of the key, or maybe they had another key, maybe they had Stephanie's copy of the house key? Did he do this because he wanted to make sure he could remove certain things, like a phone recorder that he was using to record Stephanie's phone calls, and add certain things like, I don't know, a Seagram's bottle and a red bag in the bathroom? Because then all that talk he'd been doing about not caring who she talked to, if she was talking to Craig or if she was talking to anyone, not being jealous that Stephanie allegedly had affairs, etc., all that stuff would show he was a liar if he was filming and recording her phone calls and checking up on her. And if Russell lied about that, what else was he lying about? That's a huge motive. So who called Craig at 11:20 from the Coffee Pot Drive house? Was it Stephanie? And why would she do that at 11:20 just as Russell was walking in? He says she was calling him all night, like, when are you going to be home? When are you going to be home? So Pietro's restaurant is no longer open, but I found the address and that it was located at in 1993. And it was just a 2-minute drive from Coffee Pot Drive. Russell told the police that he'd left work at 11 p.m. Susie Corbett said that she'd driven Russell home at 11:15 p.m. Either of those times would and could still put Russell home before 11:20. And if Stephanie had called Russell 3 times between 10 and 11:15, asking when he would be home, we can assume he didn't leave work till 11:15 because Stephanie called him at the restaurant at 11:15. But if she was calling him 3 times asking when he would be home, and he was at 11:15 likely saying, I'm walking out now, why would she call Craig at the very time she knew her boyfriend would be coming home and walking through the door? And yes, Russell would eventually bring the police a copy of his phone bill for July of 1993, but they're talking to him in September, and they have had months to ask him for this bill, which they never did. And so Russell volunteers. He's like, yeah, I'll bring the phone bill in. And he does. And I guess when Russell volunteered to bring his phone bill in, he forgot about the call he had made to his father before he called 911, but whatever. What I think is Russell got home and he called, the last called number, or maybe he was like looking through the numbers called that night. Somehow he knew how to do that. Now Russell switches gears. He's had some time to think about all of this, and he has decided something that seems to be contradictory, that Stephanie planned this. She didn't plan to take her own life. She planned to take his, even though that's not what ended up happening, even though she allegedly took a shot at him in the living room and completely missed.
I feel that the act, I can't forgive her for wanting to kill me, but I feel that the act was premeditated because the gun that I have, that you guys have, was in a place and in such a place on the second shelf of the closet, underneath clothes, behind this thing, that the time that she took to get up, to go into the bedroom, to come back out of the bedroom, and the last words I ever heard out of your mouth were, Russell, I'm going to kill you. You're not tall enough to get it. You didn't leave yours. It was put somewhere where it was more accessible to her.
Understand that Russell is saying Stephanie took that gun out of the closet and put it somewhere more accessible to her before he got home. And she did this with the intention of taking his life, even though his final story that he settled on a few months back was that Stephanie shot herself in the bedroom intentionally because of all her internal pain and all she'd been through, and because he was leaving for 2 weeks. As I said, Russell is no longer even pretending to be understanding of Stephanie and what she's been through. Now she's just a crazy person who was standing in the way of all that he had worked so hard for.
In less than 30 hours, a culmination of 15 years of work, I was accepted to Ithaca, New York, to go to the Taste of the Cordon Bleu. It was paid for. The tickets were. I'm there. The restaurant bought me a fucking $1,300 set of knives to go with me. My gains were like her losses. My achievements were a piece that would probably something that she couldn't accept. And all I wanted to do was have sex that night. All I wanted to do was come home, Steph. I know that Friday's going to be a very hectic day for me. Everything's going to be packed. My father's coming to pick me up early Saturday morning. I'm going to be out of here by 7 o'clock. At 10 o'clock, I'm on the plane, and I'm doing my thing. I'm doing a dream. She didn't let me go. I may or may not have told you this. It's one thing to see something on television. It's another thing to come home on the verge of what you're doing and everything else, and then the person that has been part of your life for 6 years, I trained her. I gave her the skills in the restaurant to do desserts. I gave her a sense of respect. I'm sure you checked her out. She comes from a very unstable, shitty background. One of which that I don't come from. Obviously, you guys don't come from that. But when we met at the Crescent Hotel, I would see her. She'd come in, and I'll never forget the statement that you and the other detective, Gary Sharavo. Okay. When you guys came into me, you came to my house, and you said, Stephanie's mother or Stephanie's sister has told you that on at least 50 occasions that I had beaten her.
Right.
I never, in 6 years, ever raised a hand to her. That is something, that's a way of trying to put this picture together and lay shit on me. Her ex-boyfriend did, Craig. Documented, has to be. Put her in the hospital a few times. He used to knock the shit out of her, and that's maybe their way of dealing with this. I don't know.
So firstly, if Russell continually talked to Stephanie the way that he's talking about her, like she was so broken and came from such a bad environment, unlike himself, who was not broken and who was healthy and whole, I can't imagine there wasn't resentment formed on Stephanie's part. And Russell tells the detective, I didn't grow up like that. You didn't grow up like that, as if he has any idea what kind of life or childhood anyone has had besides himself. He's trying to place Stephanie in a position of being other. She was a bad seed, not like us. Am I right? This is where I want to tie things together and show you who I believe Russell was internally, my opinion. He felt comfortable doing that to Stephanie after she died. So in return, I feel that I can give my opinion on him. When Russell called 911, he referred to Stephanie as his wife, and he also called her his wife a few times during his police interviews, although they were not married. When he talked about Cornell and going away to Ithaca, New York, he always framed it in the way of, I was accepted. I was one of the few. This is a very difficult program to get accepted into. When I think we have established that this program at Cornell was a pay and enroll type of thing. something you would read about and apply for from a magazine, something you would need to have some working experience to qualify for, but not the type of prestigious once-in-a-lifetime dream-chasing opportunity that Russell has made it out to be. Russell went on and on talking about the restaurant he worked at in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, the one run by this woman, Annie, who had no idea what she was doing with it. She didn't know how to do anything but have kids, actually, and then she was pulling her hair out in the bathroom. Thankfully, Chef Russell Gordon Ramsay Peterson was there to step in with his calming male energy and savant culinary experience and set things right to keep Annie and her restaurant afloat. He saved Annie from certain professional ruin. He saved Stephanie from the darkness of her past and offered her a better life. But neither of these women even had enough sense in their heads to appreciate it. He is the knight in shining armor. He is Superman flying around and wearing himself out trying to save everyone, but they are too broken or too stupid to give him the credit he deserves. They are too lost to even clutch on to the life preserver that he's throwing them. Some might say it sounds like Russell has quite the ego on him. Some might say it sounds like he has a superiority complex, but that doesn't quite fit in with what Russell's behavior is telling us. He doesn't bulldoze people with overt dominance. He doesn't show consistent and open arrogance. Instead, he crafts a narrative where he is essential. He's quietly essential, but consistently undervalued and underappreciated. I think what we see in Russell is a status inflation driven by actually a very fragile self-esteem, demonstrated by this status embellishment and self-enhancement. For instance, Russell calling Stephanie his wife or trying to make the police believe that's what she was, his wife, that would do a few things at once. First of all, he's trying to make the relationship look more important than it was, at least in the eyes of society. He's an adult man. He might feel weird referring to the woman he lives with and has a child with as his girlfriend. That might suggest he has a problem with maturity and commitment. Maybe he shirks his responsibilities. Calling Stephanie his wife also increases his emotional stake, at least his perceived emotional stake. Why would I hurt her? She was the mother of my child, my wife. This proves that I cared enough about her to be tied to her in every sense of the word, legally and emotionally. She was my wife. And then his mischaracterization about what his trip to Cornell University represented. He wasn't necessarily lying about his involvement with Cornell. He was just upgrading the status of that involvement. He wasn't a paying student. He was chosen because of his undeniable skill and talent. He made it less about being a chef, trying to get some more learning and trying to get some more training on certain culinary aspects. And he made it more about him being exceptional. The 9th or 10th chef chosen. The Jackson Hole restaurant, his relationship with Stephanie, they are basically the same story following the same structure. He enters a situation that's already failing. He brings his vision, his competence, his care. He saves the day, but the woman, they fail to appreciate him, and he leaves unrewarded, misunderstood, and undercredited. This doesn't mean that Russell is delusional or incapable of telling the truth. It doesn't even mean that he's intentionally painting this picture to make himself look better and make everyone else look worse. In my opinion, it's worse than that. Russell is consistently reshaping reality to protect his self-worth. And that is not the psychology of someone who's actually confident in their value. It's the psychology of someone who needs external validation to stabilize and regain their sense of self. A real Chris Watts, if you ask me. And under pressure, especially legal pressure, that tendency actually intensifies. Oh, and then there is this assertion that Russell had never laid a hand on Stephanie, which could be 100% true. There are more ways to abuse people without ever lifting a hand. But he keeps talking about the abuse from Craig, Stephanie's ex, the documented abuse. Must be documented, he now says. Was it documented, or did you just think it must have been? Because you've been saying it's documented. And these are two very different things. Must have been documented, it is documented. And as I said, there never was any documented abuse between Stephanie and her boyfriend, Craig.
You could have went to the bedroom to piss. You could have went to the bedroom to lay down. You could have went to the bedroom to do whatever. But to go to the bedroom and to come out and want to kill me. And she comes out, Russell, I'm going to kill you. And ooh, I turned, I looked, I turned, and I put my hands up and I said, wait, Stephanie, what's going on? What's the matter? Boom. Mm-hmm. The shot goes off. I fall back into the couch. I hear the gun recock. She turns around and she doesn't wait to look or to see if I am dead, if I've been hit. You guys know from what I've told you, from where that bullet went through and went outside, from where I was sitting, that if I was a more reactional person, and if I would have went, wait, Steph, she'd have hit a lip. If she would have aimed for my chest, she wouldn't have missed. She aimed for my head. She was only about this far off. It becomes. I almost thought I was shot. I mean, to look at the barrel and the size of that frickin' gun that my father gave me, I never thought I'd be looking down the barrel of a 44 Magnum. And I fell back into the couch as if I was. She turned around, she goes into the bedroom.
Okay, so now I see where the story has evolved to. Stephanie shot at Russell in the living room, and now he's saying that she intended to shoot him, to shoot and hit him, even though in past interviews he has said he didn't believe she had intended to hit him. She was just trying to scare him. He talks about the trajectory, how the shot barely missed his head. Let's return to the layout of the house and pull up the picture drawn by Nicole. We can see that the living room is central. The couch is floating in the middle of the room. The fireplace wall is on one side of the living room, and the front door and window is opposite that. The bullet struck about 3.5 feet from the front door and about 4.5 feet up from the floor. If Stephanie came out of the master bedroom hallway and was standing 15 feet from Russell when she allegedly fired that first shot, the most logical firing direction is from the fireplace side of the living room toward the front door window wall. Stephanie's autopsy said she was 68 inches in length. That puts her at about 5'8". Because the couch is floating in the center of the room and angled, the bullet's most likely straight line path does not pass directly through the center of the couch. Essentially, the bullet appears to have traveled across the room, not through Russell's seated position, and for it to barely miss his head, Russell's head would have needed to have been very close to that specific line of fire. And from the layout and what we know about where the bullet was recovered from, the line of fire looks more like it passed in front of or offset from the couch, not directly over the spot where someone seated in the middle would be. The bullet hit the wall at 52 inches above the floor. And yes, 52 inches could be at seated head height, but that doesn't matter if the bullet's horizontal path was nowhere near Russell. Based on where the bullet hit and how tall Stephanie was, and assuming it actually happened as Russell said it happened, with her standing where she was, to the point where he could see her, and she could see him, and he could make eye contact with her, it seems like she would have held the gun at a chest level and shot. A height of 5'8" would be a standing shooter's natural muzzle height with arms extended or slightly bent, and that would often fall in the range of 48 to 55 inches, and the bullet was found 52 inches off the floor. That's why I think she was probably holding the gun like this, or like this or this, whatever. But that makes sense with where the bullet landed in the wall, how high up from the floor it landed. But in my opinion, and based on the evidence, Stephanie definitely did not shoot at Russell. So now Russell is saying that she did shoot in his direction, which the evidence does not support, in which he claims before that she missed him. She wasn't trying to hit him. She was trying to scare him. And so then, because she shot in his direction and she was trying to hit him, he fell back as if he had been shot because he was scared. So she must have thought she did hit him. And instead of taking a second to actually, check that out by just looking at him, Stephanie cocked the gun again, walked into the bedroom, and took her own life because of what she thought she had just done, before taking even 1 second or half a second to confirm what she had just done.
I know I told you guys of this fight. I know I told you guys of this confrontation, of this struggle. I really don't think, and I am not excluding, that maybe it did or did not happen. And that's the point of, darkness for me. I don't think there was a struggle. The struggle was my own struggle. I wanted to grab her. I wanted to stop. Why'd you shoot at me? Stop the madness. Why did all this happen? You never gave me the chance.
What happened?
I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. I may know. It'll come to me soon. I don't think I ever put my hands on her.
Why don't you think that?
Because I saw her fall from a distance.
Saw her fall from a distance?
Yes, I saw her legs buckle.
Okay, you get the picture, right? Russell now says that his daughter Christina woke up after the first shot and that she saw her mother fall.
As I opened the door, and as I take the step, and as the gun goes off, she's up and she's down the hall. But if I'm standing there, she can't really see, but she saw her mother fall. And the act of myself, we're talking about a 4-year-old, she just turned 4 August 8th. One person up, one person down. She sees me pick up the gun, put it here. She sees me pick it back and put it back down. She sees me try and pick her up. She sees me set her back down and make the phone call. With the noise and the finality, what else is she going to think but my dad shot my mom?
I don't even want to talk about how he said he opened the door because we've never heard before this moment that the door was closed and he opened it. But Russell is saying that he would have been blocking Christina's full view, but she would have seen her mother fall after the shot. And then maybe she just put 2 and 2 together and assumed he had done it. He's creating or trying to create a scenario where Christina believes he did something that he did not because she was 4, because she had just woken up, because she saw him handling the gun, etc. But he also says he can't say for sure that there wasn't a struggle because he says that he saw Stephanie's legs buckle underneath her. So there couldn't have been a struggle because he wouldn't have been able to see her legs buckle underneath her if he'd been up close to her. And now he's saying that his body was blocking Christina's view because he was in the doorway. But he still can't say 100% that there wasn't a struggle. That part's blocked for him. But all the things he's describing, which I believe to be untrue, would certainly prove there had not been a struggle. It would not have been possible if you were in the doorway blocking Christina's view. If you saw Stephanie's legs buckle underneath her, it's not possible that you would have been right up on Stephanie holding her wrists. But I think because Russell doesn't have access to all the evidence and he doesn't know what the police are going to determine from that evidence, he doesn't want to say that there was absolutely not a struggle, because if they come back with evidence that there was, he would look like a liar. In the event that the police came back and showed him solid proof that there was a struggle, he can just now say, well, I told you there might have been and there might not have been, so technically I didn't lie to you. The police are now finally going to call Russell out.
Every time we've talked to you and every time we've interviewed you, the story's been different. Okay? And it's been at that one point, where the main event happened, the tragedy, happened. So, again, 1 minute you say you struggle with them. And then another time you said you didn't struggle. Then you described how she fell. Okay? Now we got and how she landed. We've talked to your daughter, who described how she was laying on the ground. Okay. We also have what you said on the 911 tape. You talked to the fire dispatcher, emergency dispatcher, and our police dispatcher. We also have the autopsy results and the forensic evidence that was gathered at the scene, and the evidence that was gathered or learned, the information learned from the autopsy. And we have, this is not the gun, but this is the same basic gun. It's the same model. The grip's a little different. And what I'm showing you is a Ruger 44 Magnum. Okay. The gun
It's not vented at the front.
Right, it's not vented. That's an option. This is the basic gun, same model. You would go out and buy it stock. Okay, it has different grips on it and everything. We've taken this gun. We've got a person who matches Stephanie's dimensions exactly. We measured her arms. We measured Stephanie's arms when we were doing our investigation. We found someone who matches the arms, the same. As reasonable as respectable, the same. We went through and we tried to reenact the scene of what happened, and it doesn't work. That she shot herself. And when we talked to you the last time, we told you that we didn't believe it was a suicide. Right, because of the evidence in the show. Okay. Someone of her same build, using this gun, they weren't able to squeeze the trigger. And you told us she was right-handed.
Yeah.
Okay. There is no evidence that she fired the gun in her right hand. Okay. I'm sorry. The testing is such that it's inconclusive if she fired the gun in her right hand. What we do have, though, and what the medical examiner believes, and the evidence shows, is a defensive position with her left hand, meaning that there was some evidence that showed that she was pushing the gun away with her left hand. Okay. That's one of the reasons why it wasn't a suicide. Okay, the actual event, and we're concerned with, everything in total, but the actual event when the gun went off and she died. Okay, how that happened. We're concerned that she came out and that, as you state, and unfortunately there's no one else to back you up. Okay, that she came out and shot at you first. Okay, you handled the firearm on your own self-admission. Yes, that you handled it. Okay, the results just from you handling it and the powder residue on your body and everything all comes from the fact that you were in an area when a gun went off, whether you shot it or whether she shot it. Okay, so those are like inconclusive. Doing your hands, if the powder residues had come out, it would have been inconclusive because you readily admit that you handled the firearm. Yes, and that's all it really it shows. But with the powder in her thing there, the medical examiner is under the opinion that it was defensive posture.
I want to stop here because the police are saying a few things. They are saying there was gunshot residue found on Russell's clothing, and they're also kind of saying that they didn't do a gunshot residue test on his hands because he had admitted to handling the gun, so that test would have been inconclusive. Now, this isn't even really true, and even though Russell admitted to holding the gun after it was fired and like putting it in the holster and putting it in the closet, even though he admitted to holding the gun, a GSR test still should have been done. GSR testing looks for 3 main chemicals or primer elements: lead, antimony, and barium. Not only does it look for chemicals, but the testing looks for where those particles are found, how they're concentrated, how concentrated they are, the distribution pattern. So if Russell handled the gun after it was fired, you would expect some GSR on his palms or fingers, but it would be more of a transfer type GCR, more random and like smeared almost. If Russell had fired a gun, they would see GSR in a much higher concentration on his hands, on the back of his hands, the webbing between his fingers, the webbing between his thumb and forefinger, and it would be more symmetrical and it wouldn't be smudged. It would be more concentrated. For the police to say the GSR test would automatically be inconclusive since Russell admitted to handling the gun, that is concerning to me. It's either they don't know better or they're just trying to not get more evidence. At this point, the police are confronting Russell with his inconsistencies and with the statement of the medical examiner who performed Stephanie's autopsy. They're focusing on the fact that the ME believed the GSR present on Stephanie's left hand showed a defensive posture. This is great. I'm glad they're doing it. But if they had accompanying GSR testing from Russell's hands that showed he had a high concentration of gunshot residue on the front and back of his hands, wrist, forearms, etc., it would have been so much better. So now they're going to ask him to explain why these inconsistencies exist.
How do you explain maybe that?
I can't explain.
You don't. How could she? Again, you're saying she's right-handed and trying to pull the trigger like this. We have the trajectory and everything on how the bullet was.
I don't even know where she was shot.
Everything appears to be there was a struggle. Okay, there was a struggle.
Okay.
What happened? We just want the truth. If it's an accident, it's an accident.
Giving you guys above and beyond myself the truth.
Now you've heard your story, okay, and I've related to you basically some of the evidence that we have, and I've kind of basically given you some of our concerns as to why it's hard to believe that it happened as you're remembering it. Right? You understand that?
Yes.
Okay. I'm trying to give you, an opportunity to respond and to help us. I mean, again, because if it was an accident, we want to prove it was an accident. As we told in the very beginning, if it was an accident, we're not out to hang you. We're not out to get a conviction on you because of an accident. I mean, accidents happen. Reasonable people can believe accidents happen. Correct. Evidence can show that an accident happened. Or an evidence can not necessarily show that it was an accident, but can cooperate that it was an accident. It makes it easier for a reasonable person to believe that there was a struggle, if there was. Again, we told you that if it was premeditated on your part, or if it was a murder, then we would prosecute you to the best of our ability.
To the fullest.
And that's an understanding we've had. And you have been I believe you've been truthful with us up to a point. I believe now that you get to where the event happened, and I believe you know what happened. You know what happened during that event because you explained it to us how you believed it happened initially. You were very clear. It was corresponding with what your daughter said. Everything was everything was falling into place.
Mm-hmm.
Now you don't know what happened. Now, if you don't know what happened, now the second and third time that we interviewed you, we put the evidence together, and it's like the evidence is showing that she did not commit suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There was no one else present in the room, correct? Just
No,
you.
no, it was her and myself.
Okay. She can't speak for herself. We have to represent her and her interests here. Well, what do you think the outcome to a grand jury or to would be on what we have?
I don't know, because I don't know what you guys have. And so, the thing of it is that I've been left a victim and everything was stripped of me throughout this. And I want to know myself.
I think they're giving him an out here. The police are literally telling Russell that the evidence they have supports the initial version of the story that he told in which a struggle happened. But now he keeps changing his story, and so it's making it harder to allow him to be off the hook by saying it's an accident. The police are saying, we know that she didn't kill herself. We know this. Based on what we have, especially the trajectory, we know she didn't kill herself. The police want, in my opinion, for Russell to revert back to the original version of events and admit that there was a struggle so they can call Stephanie's death an accident and move on. But at this point, Russell has made such a circus of the whole thing, and his ego won't allow him to do that. His fear won't allow him to do that. He wants to put himself as far away from that gun when it went off as he physically can. And now that he's lied, he feels, in my opinion, like if he goes back to his first story, the police will be even more suspicious because he lied so much to make himself seem less guilty. And he's painting himself as a victim in all of this, even though Stephanie is the one who's dead. I'll quickly tell you that I 100% believe his hand or hands were on that gun when it went off. And I don't necessarily believe that it was an accident. It could have been, like the police are saying, hey, that first version, you struggled over the gun, it went off. That's plausible. The evidence will be more pointing that way than with this new story you're telling. But I don't think it was an accident. I don't know that it was premeditated, as in something he decided to do before that night, because that would have ruined his chances to fly off to Cornell, and he really wanted to, right? With his dead girlfriend, he can't go off to Cornell in a day and a half now. But this, in my opinion, was a heat of the moment type act. Russell came home. Stephanie argued with him about going to Cornell. She may have said some things about how if that's what he wanted to do, if he wanted to spend money they didn't have on this course that he could have waited to take, it was a sign to her that the family and herself was not his top priority, and she and the girls would not be there when he returned home. I think the argument became heated. Somehow a gun became involved, and Stephanie ended up shot, maybe after a struggle. A struggle where the trigger would have been pulled, and Stephanie's finger was not the one on the trigger. But I don't think it was an accident, because Stephanie being in a defensive posture would not mean her grabbing at the trigger or trying to pull the trigger while the gun was pressed into her neck. Why would she do that? So why would you have to, as Russell, struggle with the gun and put your finger on the trigger? Did he put his finger on the trigger to make sure that her finger wouldn't go to the trigger? But why would her finger go to the trigger if the gun was pressed into her neck, which it was? Pretty, in a flush manner, gun right into the neck. I think that he pulled the trigger after pressing it into her neck because he was mad, because he just couldn't stand it anymore, that he'd given her so much and done so much for her and saved her from a life of certain ruin and darkness. And she couldn't just let him use all of their money to go off to Cornell so that he could pretend he was important and keep his fragile self-esteem intact. I believe in that moment, the thing that was most important to Russell was threatened. The way things looked, the glass house he had carefully constructed around himself. If he left and Stephanie took the kids and left him, when he came back, he would have to explain why, or maybe she would do it for him, while she was gone. While he was gone, she would go into the restaurant and say, listen, I'm giving my notice. I'm leaving. I'm leaving Russell. I'm leaving Sedona. Russell took all of our money, even though I told him it wasn't a good time. He spent the money I had been saving to bring our children to Disneyland. He left me pretty much broke, and he's not a good partner. He didn't care what I felt about this. He's drunk all the time. We don't even have sex anymore, and I am done. And then what is Russell when he returns to Sedona? Someone who paid to take a course at Cornell and lost everything in the process? We know Stephanie didn't mince words. We know she would be someone that was upfront and even crude in the way she explained to everyone why that relationship ended. So Russell now has this certificate of completion for a 2-week course, but he doesn't have anything else, and everyone would know that he was a fraud, that he was selfish, and he put something so unimportant ahead of everything that actually mattered. And this makes Russell angry. He's like, I'm going to fly away for 2 weeks and leave this woman here to set a narrative about who I am. And I'm going to come back and my kids aren't going to be here. And my wife isn't going to be here. I mean, my girlfriend's not going to be here. And I'm not going to have money to pay for anything because I'm not getting a paycheck for 2 weeks. And I blew all the money that we had on this course. And why can't she just let me do what I want? He was angry. This wasn't a planned thing like I'm going to kill her and my life will be easier. He was just angry. We now find out from the police that if Russell is a victim, it's one of his own making.
Well, you said you were everything was stripped from you. I think we've been more. No. Let me finish, okay? I think we've been more than understanding with you, okay? You've canceled appointments with us, okay? We've scheduled them with you, okay? I tried calling you. You've moved. You promised me you'd give me your phone number as soon as you got a new one, and that you had the phone. You just didn't recall it. You never returned that. We've gone out of our way. I mean, we've been over backwards to show that it was an accident for you. Okay, we have no reason to doubt what you were telling us initially was true. Initially, what you were telling us, we had no reason to doubt what you initially and your the statements and the evidence at the scene, what was saying. And then when you change the story, we have to be able to I have to convince this man that it was an accident. And just from what you said today, he wasn't convinced before that it was an accident. And I can't. He was sitting here, but I don't see you showing anything to convince today that it was an accident or that she committed suicide. And again, it's going to go before reasonable peers. Okay. And that's where the decisions are going to be made if it goes to a grand jury. A group of reasonable people, and we're going to present it. Again, when we told you before, we wanted the truth, and the truth means consistency in what happened. You know if you were in the room, if you struggled or not. There's no way an event of that sort you would forget. I mean, I don't care how tragic it is. I mean, it is tragic. It's probably the biggest thing that's happened in your life.
It's the biggest thing of the life.
And it's the biggest thing that happened in your children's life.
Getting to where we understood or thought that what you were telling us was the way it happened. And then there became a point after the first few interviews or first few days interview where you canceled a polygraph, which would have helped you clear this up, would have helped us clear this up. You canceled a polygraph. The reenactment, which would help the detectives get a better grasp of exactly how it happened. You canceled that. You've become not maybe intentionally or whatever, but uncooperative up to a point, which is leaving you and leaving us with a real problem here. And I can't, in all consciousness, believe that it happened the way you say it happened, when all of a sudden, like Walt says, you kind of selectively forgot and selectively quit cooperating with us to get to this point. If it was an accident, you struggled, we can all live with that. That's not a problem. But you remembered it one way up to a point, and the polygraph, like you say, and the reenactment would have helped us immensely clear up some doubts in our mind, which you've left us with now.
Now we find out Russell has been evasive. Russell has been uncooperative. He's canceled interviews. He's canceled a polygraph test. He's changed his number and then didn't provide the police with his new number. And after this interview, Russell won't ever speak to the police again. Was there a grand jury called? No, the case was never presented to a grand jury. Russell Peterson was never charged and never arrested, although it seems in his last interview the police were pretty suspicious. They talked about how they have to show this guy that it was an accident. And even before Russell changed his story, the guy was not believing it was an accident. The guy that they're talking about is clearly the county attorney, Charles Hastings. If Hastings didn't believe it was an accident, and the police who have talked to Russell Peterson multiple times were also having a hard time with his changing stories, why did nothing ever happen? Relatives of Stephanie's continued to push for answers, specifically Stephanie's sister, Wendy. Wendy would take Nikki and Christina to Disneyland in the summer of 1994 to fulfill Stephanie's wish, even though her daughters had been separated by then. Nikki went to live with her father, and Christina went to live with hers. Nikki said that after their mother's death, Christina was consistent with her beliefs that their father had killed their mother. When they were in Disneyland, suddenly Christina believed that their mother had taken her own life. And you could hear the police in that final conversation with Russell. They're saying, no, Stephanie did not take her own life. It did not happen that way. So, let's be honest about what happened here. The police don't believe Stephanie took her own life. Obviously, Christina at that point was young. She'd been living with Russell, so this change is no surprise. And Nikki believes that her Aunt Wendy and her grandmother Bee confronted Russell with this because at this point he prevented contact between Nikki and Christina, and Nikki would not speak to her sister again for 10 years. As Nikki grew, she was understandably drawn to true crime, and that's why she's going to eventually start her podcast, Papi Killed Mommy. In 1999, Jim Landis, the Yavapai County attorney at the time, sent a letter to Dana Schmidt, a Sedona Police Department lieutenant. He says in this letter that Wendy, Stephanie's sister, had been trying to get a hold of him for a meeting, and they'd finally met the day previous where Wendy gave Jim a list of additional people to be interviewed. Jim Landis asked Schmidt if there was any reconstruction done at the crime scene, and if there was, please provide him with the results. The letter says, quote, "By sending you the above request, we are not in any way indicating that this case will be filed. I think that we all agree, however, that we still have a nagging suspicion that the suspect may have committed some degree of homicide. Consequently, the above requested additional investigation may help us clear the air. Thank you for your continued investigation into this matter." End quote. So we have the county attorney in 1999 saying, hey, we're all still suspicious of this, and they're calling Russell a suspect. Now, he's asking the Sedona police for this information, and there's no indication that any of this was ever done or provided. Additionally, in the case file, we see that in October of 1993, Detective Walter Spokes met with Investigator Saravo and Charles Hastings, the county attorney, to discuss the case. Hastings suggested to Investigator Saravo that he should contact a psychologist and have Russell Peterson's statements reviewed by them, the psychologist. The report says, quote, "Mr. Hastings advised that if no new information is revealed after the review by the psychologist, that he would consider the investigation complete and make a charging decision at that time. Mr. Hastings advised that he would make contact with this officer and provide a written decision. Mr. Hastings also advised that when appropriate, he will issue a news release." End quote. As it turns out, the Sedona police never did get together with a psychologist to have Russell's statements analyzed. Now, the way I'm reading this, the county attorney is not saying, based on what we find out from this psychological analysis, I will make a decision on whether or not to charge Russell Peterson. He is saying, based on this analysis, I will make a decision on what to charge him with. And you can see from 1999, the then county attorney is also like some level of homicide, right? Because there's multiple different things that somebody could be charged with, not just straight out, hey, you murdered her or you didn't. It could be first-degree manslaughter, second-degree homicide, whatever. It sounds like the county attorney in 1993 was not deciding, do we charge Russell Peterson? He was trying to decide, what do we charge Russell Peterson with? There's no language about determining whether criminal charges are warranted, and the investigation was going to be considered complete after Russell's statements were analyzed by a psychologist. This wouldn't be something that a prosecutor would do when they thought a case was weak or closed. It's something they would do when they felt the statements the suspect provided were inconsistent, if they already believed he had shaky credibility and they wanted this supported by a professional so that they could bring the charges. Additionally, prosecutors don't talk about news releases when they're undecided or they're leaning towards not charging. They're not like, oh, we'll put out a press release when it's appropriate. A press release wouldn't even be something on their mind if they were thinking, well, we're probably not going to charge this guy. A press release is prepared when charges are anticipated and public explanation will be required. So what happened here? If a psychological analysis was done, why weren't the results included in the police report? If the results supported not charging Russell, which is what ended up happening, he wasn't charged, why wouldn't the supporting documentation be provided so as to make sense of that decision? I don't know. Is it because it never happened? Hopefully we'll get more information in the next couple of weeks. Nikki, Nicole, Stephanie's daughter, is going to have more access to more police files, and she's actually got a meeting coming up, and hopefully we get some explanation, because I'm not saying that the Sedona police made a decision to not charge Russell because of, they were covering something up or for any nefarious reasons. I just want to know why. Why was the decision made to not charge him? And if you have a valid reason, if evidence came to light that you haven't shared or that we don't know about, that showed absolutely Russell was not responsible for this at all. We want to know it because apparently in 1993, when you did this investigation, no one thought Stephanie took her own life. And based on the ballistics and the trajectory and all the evidence, it wasn't even possible. I don't know. I don't know why would you not look into Russell more or charge him for something? The guy made up different stories over the course of a few days. And the Sedona police never followed up on the request given to them in 1999 either, at which time it is once again clear that Russell has always been seen as a suspect, and he was always seen as someone who may have potentially committed some level of homicide. When Nikki's sister Christina was 13 or 14, she reached out to Nikki, and this was for the first time in a decade, and I guess Christina let Nikki know that she had just run away from her father, Russell, and was then living with her stepmother. So Russell had gotten married quickly after Stephanie died, and Russell started a new family. He and his new wife had another kid together. And according to Nikki, the new wife filed for divorce within a year or two, but it was still this woman who Christina turned to for sanctuary after leaving the home of her father, Russell. This woman also told Nikki that Russell had told her what happened the night after Stephanie died, and he had allegedly told his wife that he had taken a shower, started a load of laundry, and made some phone calls after Stephanie had been shot. So this was in the early 2000s, and when Christina reached out to Nikki, the two sisters met in person. They rekindled their relationship. Nikki was still very young. She didn't know what to do with the information that Russell's ex-wife had shared with her. Within a few years of reconnecting, Christina stopped contact with Nikki over a personal matter. Nikki continued living her life, believing the Sedona police were still actively working on her mother's case and waiting for them to call one day to tell her that something had happened, something had changed, justice was coming. Around 2017, Christina entered Nikki's life again. They began growing their relationship until Nikki tried to talk about what happened to their mother, and Christina shut down. Nikki said, quote, "I let it go, thinking there would be another chance, but there wasn't. In 2018, our grandma died. By 2019, our relationship had dissolved again, but this time it was mutual," end quote. Nikki said that the last time Christina called was July of 2020, but Nikki didn't take the call. At that time, they were kind of not on good terms, and Nikki had her boyfriend talk to Christina, and she wouldn't talk to Christina. But apparently at that time in July of 2020, the Sedona police had called Christina asking her to do a confrontation call with her father, Russell. So it looks like maybe the Sedona police were still actively investigating Stephanie's case. Now understand, there was next to no media coverage on Stephanie's case. There was 3 articles, basically, a handful of articles I could find. Only one was from 1993. Only one. And then there was a July 2020 article in the Red Rock News where we hear that the Sedona Police Department doesn't have a lot of cold cases, especially not ones deemed a homicide. And we also hear that Sergeant Michael Dominguez is taking another look at the case at the request of Stephanie's family. And Dominguez says, quote, "What was conveyed to us at that time was there were no other witnesses other than Russell and the children. The children were in bed sleeping in other rooms when the incident occurred. The autopsy report from the medical examiner at the time called it a homicide," end quote. According to Russell's own statement, Christina was not in bed at the time the incident occurred. The shot in the living room had woken her up and she saw her mother fall, but okay. The article goes on to say that the investigation was completed by the Sedona Police Department, but the Yavapai County Attorney's Office did not feel there was enough evidence to prove a homicide had occurred. Therefore, the case never proceeded past the investigative stages. Dominguez says that since the case is still considered open and there's no statute of limitations with potential homicide cases, the first thing he did was immediately seek out the cause of death. He said, quote, "Based on the evidence, I see there's more to the story than that of a suicide. Can I tell you that it's a homicide with 100% certainty? No," end quote. What did we talk about? A suicide here? It was never considered a suicide by anyone, which is clear from the police files. So, I mean, did Dominguez read the police files? There's not more to it than a suicide because by all the evidence gathered, it never logically or technically could have been. So why is this police officer, Michael Dominguez, even using that word in this article? Later that month, the Red Rock News published another article with the help of Sergeant Michael Dominguez, and this is what he said in that article. Quote, "If you're solely focused that this was a right-handed individual, and they only could have used their right hand, which to me is not practical, then having that trajectory would have been difficult. Is it impossible? No. However, if you take that pistol and put it in the person's left hand and move the gun up, it's exactly at the location of the entry wound. The family is over-focused on that fact, that she was right-handed, and that she could have only done this with her right hand," end quote. First of all, this is pissing me off. So Dominguez goes on to say that he takes the theory of Stephanie only being able to shoot herself with her dominant hand with a grain of salt, and the family is over-focused on Stephanie being right-handed. No, the medical examiner who performed the autopsy. the gunshot residue being on Stephanie's left hand in a way that suggested a defensive posture, the reenactment being done to show that the angle Stephanie was shot at was impossible for her to do herself with either hand. And yes, would have been possible with a struggle, yes, but that's what everyone's focused on, the evidence, the reenactments. And that's why I played you so many clips from Russell's interviews, because you would be able to see for yourself that the police and the county's attorney's office were not buying what he was selling in 1993 because of what they had uncovered during their investigation. So I don't know what the hell Michael Dominguez is talking about. Dominguez does go on to address Russell's changing story, saying, quote, "When you do multiple interviews with someone, you expect variations. I'm more suspicious when someone has the exact same story 3 different times because to me, that's a rehearsal," end quote. I mean, it's a rehearsal if the person's lying about the story, but if it's the truth about what happened and it's just said 3 times in a row in the same way, why would that be odd? Why would that be a rehearsal? I thought Dominguez was supposed to be an unbiased set of eyes on the case, not Russell Peterson's defense attorney and public relations person. Dominguez says Russell's story changed a few times content-wise, and this is a gross minimalization as I have illustrated to you. Everything changed. Dominguez ends his interview with the Red Rock News by saying that he will provide evidence he has to the county attorney for review and opinion before the possibility of making any kind of formal request to pursue the case. But he said, quote, "I won't have a decision until I can prove it to myself because I'm the one who has to say there's probable cause. I don't have that. There's too many inconsistencies. Short of a confession, I'm not sending this for prosecution," end quote. Stellar police work, Dominguez. Wait for the confession. That must take up a lot of time in your workday. I really applaud your hard work. He's the one who's going to make the decision, and he doesn't think there's enough evidence. So, outside of a confession, what are we going to do? Now, you could call a grand jury. You could call a grand jury, have the grand jury look at this case and decide whether they feel that a prosecution or a charge is in order. But no, we're not going to do that. So now we have a call of action for you. First, I want you to go in the description box and check out Nikki's podcast, Papi Killed Mommy. Listen to it. There's a lot there. A lot we've already talked about, but a lot more, especially the updates and what she's got going on. And I assume when she takes this meeting and when she gets the full police report and gets more information, she will be doing updates about that. So I want you to go over and check her out and give her your support. Also, we can do something. We can ask for answers. We can put pressure on the people who have the answers and just haven't provided them. I called the county attorney's office and I called the Sedona Police Department and kind of got the runaround, but I'll keep trying. So if you believe that Stephanie Wasilishin's case deserves accountability, especially given all I have told you in these last 2 episodes, you can respectfully reach out to the office now handling the investigation, which is the Yavapai County Attorney's Office in Prescott, Arizona. And their phone number is 928-771-3300. Once again, 928-771-3300. I will put that up on the screen, and I will make sure it's in the description box. You can also email them at county.attorney@yavapaiaz.gov. Once again, I'll put that up on the screen because Yavapai, I might not even be saying it right. I'm trying to, but it's a hard word. And I will put it up on the screen, and it will be in the description box. So you can call them, and you can email them, and you can ask, why is this still open? Why, after all the inconsistencies and the clear changing of stories to where Russell ended up saying that Stephanie had wanted to kill him and then ended up killing herself when the evidence doesn't prove that, why was he never charged? Why was a grand jury never called? Why is he still out there living his life when he took a mother of 2 away from her children and her family and her life? Or allegedly he did that. He may have. I think he had something more to do with it than he's saying. Personally, myself, me. That's just me. That's my opinion based on what I know, and I'm allowed to have that opinion. So you guys can actually call this place. You can email them. You can ask for answers. And I think you should. And that's why I thought that this case was so important. And I know that it took 2 long episodes, but I'm glad it did because there was so much to talk about and so much to examine. And we did. And once again, go over to Nikki's podcast. I will link it in the description box. Check it out and stay updated with what's transpiring in this case. I talked to Derek about bringing Nikki up on stage with us at CrimeCon in Vegas this year, and he's all for it. So if you're going to CrimeCon this year, you will be able to hear her talk about her mother and her mother's case in person, and we'll be able to talk about more updates at that time. And I will keep you updated as much as I can. So once again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for taking your time to learn about Stephanie and to learn about Nikki's fight to keep her mother's case open and to get some justice for it. Thank you so much for watching these 2 long videos. Give me a thumbs up if you stayed the whole time. Like the video if you liked it. Share it if you think it's worth sharing. Subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, stay kind, stay safe, stay beautiful. I love you so much, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.
Oh, the levee don't break now, and the bottle's going straight down.